Okay. All right, so hopefully it's all being recorded from here. Okay, so here we are, and this is your Blackboard page, all right? This is my view, of course, but for the students, it's something similar. So I'm gonna scroll all the way down here to our Spring 21 session, which is here. So I'm gonna click. And then I'm gonna move back to here. If you look in the left-hand column, you see this option that says lessons. So we're going to go ahead and click on lessons. Okay. And when you do that, here you can see a list of all of the chapters that have been uploaded. These are PowerPoint presentations, everything that we will be going over during the semester all the way down. And towards the end, you have these three documents, the CID, that stands for Course Information Document. Okay. That's all general information as regards our course for this semester. Frequently asked questions, that's a document that addresses some of the most commonly asked queries that come my way from the students. So I just went ahead and made a compilation of all of that. And then LID, which stands for Lab Information Document. Okay, so that talks about the lab portion of our course here. So let me start with the first one here, the one that says CID. And let me put up here and start sharing one more time. All right, so here is some general information about the class. All right, so of course we're going into spring 2021. My name, your course section, and the most important piece of information on this page is my email address, as you can see here, okay? So please make sure that you have all of those letters in the correct order. That's a common mistake. Students often tend to misspell the name, misplace the letters, switch them around, and I never get those emails. So please make sure that you're using the very same email and you're spelling out all of those terms and letters as they are there, okay? Now you can also use a little my in front of my.tccd.edu. I also have that Gmail account, just like the students do. So that works as well. Okay, as long as you're emailing me either here or at my Gmail, which of course is when you add a little my after the at here, my.tccd.edu, I should be getting those emails, okay? And usually I reply within the first 5 minutes, if not earlier, right? But certainly within the first 24 hours, you should be hearing back from me. So here are my office hours, okay? And these are virtual hours, of course. You're welcome to email me at any time. And then again, this is something which will be an ongoing feature since this is our primary mode of communication. So you will be emailing me and I will be getting back to you with the required information. So please make sure that you're, again, checking your inboxes regularly and keeping in contact, okay? So let me know if you have any questions. So then what follows here is a course description, which of course talks about what basically the course is, anatomy and physiology. And some of this information is redundant. It doesn't apply now, again, because we are 100% virtual at this point. But please feel free to browse over all of this information that is given here, okay? Course focus, of course, is on the study of anatomy and physiology, okay? Transfer considerations. If you have any questions, let me know. If I do not have the answers, I will certainly find someone who can answer those questions for you. Okay, the text that we will be using over the course of the semester. Here's the textbook, Anatomy and Physiology, an Integrative Approach by McKinley, 3rd edition. Now, it's recommended that you have this book, okay? Not mandatory, but it definitely helps to have the actual text with you, so you can always go back and refer for any information, pointers that you might need at any point. However, just know that if you purchase a brand new textbook, the one that we are looking at here, McKinley, 3rd edition, that should come with a free access code to the Connect website. And that's something that we will need for sure. We do need a access code to get to the Connect website. As I'd mentioned in my emails, that is where all of your class exams and quizzes and virtual labs would be posted, okay? And so it's imperative that we have access to the Connect website, okay? And that comes for free with the purchase of a brand new textbook. You might choose to order a second-hand or a third-hand textbook for much cheaper. That's fine. Just keep in mind that you will have to purchase an access code separately then to the Connect website, okay? Or you can just simply purchase the Connect website code, and you decide that you're in good shape and you don't need the textbook. You can do with the notes and with other study resources. That's fine as well. I will leave it at your discretion, okay? All right, so student contribution, as you can see, spend at least 9 hours per week, which is about an hour to an hour and a half every day. These are some general recommendations. Some students have a better background in anatomy and physiology and biology, so they might feel a little bit more comfortable. Other students might need more time. So we will set our own pace as we progress through the course here, okay? Students will listen diligently to the recorded lectures on Zoom, as I'm recording now, shared by the instructor by 6 p.m. every Saturday. So you would be getting these recorded lectures on Zoom via your email every Saturday by 6 p.m. So please make sure that you're continuing to check your inboxes and you have access to all of those. In addition to the recorded lectures, I will also be writing down notes, all right, handwriting down notes in my notebook as I go over the different study points, and then I will be sending you a picture of those notes at the end, okay? And so as you listen to the lecture, you can also refer to those notes, because the questions that you will get on your exams will be based on those. And then again, there are some bonus questions that I will talk about shortly here. And they also are taken from things that we discuss here during lectures, okay? Sometimes not necessarily found in your PowerPoint presentations. So keep checking your emails and keep on top of those things. Any questions, you have my email address. Please do not hesitate to let me know at any point. Students are expected to contact the instructor within one class day of an absence if they miss an exam. Let me know, okay? If anything is going on, and then I can take a look and try to work with your schedule as much as it's possible. But the key here is to be in constant contact with the instructor. Let me know what's going on so we can plan things out. Okay, only those with documented excused absences may substitute an average of completed unit exams for one missing unit exam grade. No other makeup exams will be given. So again, keep me in the loop. Let me know what's going on so I can plan accordingly. Quizzes are due and must be submitted online by the time listed on McGraw-Hill Connect. Late assignments will not be graded. There are no makeups for missed quizzes. So as I'd mentioned in my emails, I have already sent out the actually not sent out, but I have activated all 7 of your lecture quizzes on the Connect website, okay? So as of now, you can go there if you are registered, of course, and if you feel confident enough, you can start taking those quizzes, all right, and get done even before we get over that material. Not necessarily recommended though. I would much rather that you wait for me to go over that subject matter, and at that point, you go back and you do the quizzes and follow the timeline which is mentioned on the schedule, which I will be showing you guys here shortly as well. Or you can wait till the very end after we are done with all the lectures and take all 7 quizzes in one go. All of those are acceptable ways of doing the quizzes as long as I get them before the mentioned deadline in my email, okay? And all of these quizzes again are on the Connect website. These are 15 multiple choice type questions each. Each question is worth 1 point. So 15 point quizzes, 7 in all, okay? Students are expected to finish exams in a timely manner, for example, 50 to 100 questions in 55 minutes. So I'll talk about the exam format here shortly. Just know that all the exams, again, will be posted on the Connect website. And I will be sending out study guides and reminders in advance, so you guys know when to do that, okay? So usually your lecture exams will be, again, on a Saturday from 3 to 4 p.m., okay? And I will send out a study guide, as I mentioned, to help you guys prepare for those. But keep in mind that the time frame would be in between 3 to 4 p.m. on Saturdays. Uh, as far as the format of the exam is concerned, I'll be coming there shortly. So course evaluation, now that is some important information there. So we will be having 4 lecture exams, as you can see here, each worth 100 points. Okay, so as far as the exams are concerned, what we have here is 30 multiple choice type questions every exam, okay? So there will be 30 multiple choice type questions, each worth 4 points. So that means you have what, 130 points at your disposal, right? 120 points at your disposal every exam. So that means technically you have 20 extra credit points because again, the exam is, it's graded out of 100 points, but you actually have 120 points that you can score off of, right? As far as the exams themselves are concerned, 10 of the questions I will be sending out a study guide for. And so you can use the study guide to prepare for that material. The rest of the 20 questions will come directly from the lectures that I will be recording. So specific like clinical points, right? How do you examine someone who might be suffering from a hernia or an appendix infection or something like that, that we might have talked about in my lectures, or, you know, the origin of extraterrestrial life or something like that. So all of these peripheral bits of information that we talk about, they would be fair game for those 20 questions out of the 30. And that is where those points will be taken from. So listen to the lectures diligently and go over the notes that I will be sharing with the class at the end of every lecture, okay? And then keep up with the study guide and you should be fine there. All right, then we have the 7 quizzes. All of them would be on the Connect website. Each would be worth 15 points, okay? And then we also have case studies, which are worth 50 points each. And these case studies are basically research papers where you will likely choose a disease and then prepare a research article on that. And I will be giving out guidelines for how to work on that. So those would be 50 points and all, okay? Then you have a comprehensive final exam, as you see. And this final exam would be, of course, at the very end of the semester, where you will actually have 50 questions instead of the 30, the usual 30 on every lecture exam. You will have 50 questions, 3 points each. So that gives you what, 150 points, okay? So 5 points bonus credit, extra credit, you can think of it that way. I will be sending out a study guide for your comprehensive final exam as well. Basically, the study guide would talk about the first 25 questions. The rest of the 25 questions would again be taken from the lectures that we will be covering throughout the semester, okay? All right, so then that leaves us with the lab. And the lab is worth 300 points. And I will talk about how lab is structured separately here in a little bit. So all in all, if you take all of those points together, you have a total of 1,000 points that we will be going for, right? And these are cumulative points. So there's no such thing as passing labs and lectures separately. There's no such thing. Every assignment, every test, every quiz, every case study that you turn in, it counts for you, okay? So, there's no such thing as passing lab and lecture portions separately. It's a cumulative overall grade out of 1,000 points. So do as best as you can on everything. So your letter grading, as you can see here, is to get an A, the letter grade A, you have to score at least 895 points out of 1,000 or higher. 795 to 894 would be a B, 695 to 794 would be a C, then 595 to 694 would be a D, and a total score out of 1,000 of less than 594 points is not considered a passing grade, as you see here. Now, based on how well you have performed over the semester and your attendance record, your communication, and all of that. Let's say you have had a stellar, wonderful record throughout, and you end up with, let's say, 890 points. You're just 5 points shy of making it to an A. Usually I will grant those points. Again, if I'm familiar with the students and I see that they're hardworking people and they are within 5 points of making it to the next higher grade, usually I will grant it. In exceptional circumstances, maybe 6 points. You have an 889. And so I'll give you those final 6 points. And these are points, not percentages, not percent, points again, okay? And push you to the next higher grade. Okay, extra credit. So as I mentioned, in my lecture exams, you will have those 20 points, extra credit based on those questions every exam. All right. So then down here, we have the lecture topics, okay? So here's the date and what we will be covering in our lectures. So some of the important dates to pay attention to, again, is when you see these quiz dates here, for example, it says Connect Quiz 1. What that means is on the 6th of February, as you see here, after we are done with our lecture on blood, you should be in good shape to take Connect Quiz 1. So these are recommended dates for taking your quizzes, okay? Again, this is not mandatory. You can finish all the quizzes even before we start. You can finish them as they are mentioned here on the schedule, which I recommend because this is in keeping with what we are covering in class, or you can wait till the very end and then do all the 7 quizzes just before the deadline. Not recommended because you don't want some mishap to happen right at the last moment. But the point is you have all of those options there, okay? Then the other important dates to pay attention to is this, the exams, okay? For example, our first exam would be on February the 13th, and that would be taken from chapters 17 and 18. So something to keep in mind. Again, I will be sending out a study guide for that, and I will be reminding you of the time to take that exam on the Connect website. 30 questions, 10 would be based on the study guide. The rest of the 20 would come from the lectures, and 4 points each. So a total of 120 points, all right? 20 extra credit points, if you will. Okay, so there you have it. This is your schedule. Keep those dates in mind. Always feel free to refer to these afterwards. So then here is your lab schedule, okay? And again, as I mentioned before, I'll talk about the labs separately at the end of the lecture on your chapter 17, actually, which is for today. And then I'll talk about this as well, okay? All right, what else? Then let me go ahead and share these frequently asked questions with you, okay? Here, so you guys can see these. What is this class all about and how will it help me in my future and your career, possibly? So obviously the class is all about human anatomy and physiology. Anatomy means structure, the study of structure of the human body. Physiology is the study of the function of the body, okay? And it also, of course, as you can see here, discuss disease conditions, medical applications, medical interventions. And based on my own background as a medical doctor, I tend to emphasize a lot of pathology. Pathology, again, is the study of disease. Patho means disease. Logi is the Greek word for study of. So the study of disease, pathology, is something that I would emphasize as you will see it throughout the course. And it'll help you with your possible future allied health career, right? Nursing, respiratory technicians, surgical assistants, all those kinds of fields. Also, just to increase your general knowledge about the workings of the human body. Some students might have that goal. Actually, all of us should have that goal, right? What are you expected to do? Well, listen to the lectures, the recordings that I send out regularly, and pay attention to the notes, again, which I'm going to send out, all right? Stay in regular touch with the instructor. Let me know how is it going at your end, and yeah, study seriously for the class, of course. The schedule is posted on my TCC on your Blackboard and also on WebAdvisor. Grading criteria also posted, and I've just talked about that as well. What does the professor really teach and emphasize? Again, based on the fact that I'm a doctor of medicine, basically by training, So I emphasize a lot of disease processes, right? Pathology, and then clinical medicine, which means, again, how would you examine a patient, right? How would you take a medical history from a patient, perform medical exams on the patient, and come up with a diagnosis, or rather a list of diagnoses, okay? Is there any extra credit available? Yes. Uh, every exam and lecture carries actually 5 bonus points, each worth 4. Yes, which each worth 4 points. So that would be 20 points extra credit if you look at that. Okay. The curve on the test, well, that is the curve. The curve is those extra points that I've just mentioned. How do you know the content of the forthcoming exams and tests? I will be sending out a study guide in advance. So hopefully a week in advance, if not more. What are the professor's favorite topics and strengths? I have a special interest in neurology, which again is the disease of study of the diseases of the nervous system, immunology, study of the immune system, and tropical medicine. Tropical medicine has to do with these newly emerging viruses and bacteria and infections. COVID-19 would be one example of just such an emerging infection. We hadn't heard of that before. So tropical medicine deals with these diseases which are more prevalent in tropical areas. And now that's no more the case because of our modern travel. People are flying in and out all the time. There's no such thing as tropical medicine. It's worldwide, global pandemics, global medicine. It's all interconnected now. What if I miss some classes? How would it affect my grades? Well, you cannot technically miss classes anymore as long as you're listening to the recorded lectures. So just pay attention to that. How to bring up your score. Study seriously and in a timely fashion. Pay attention, take notes in lectures, pay attention to the study guide, and maintain good attendance. Don't miss any classes. So pay attention there again. And repetition is the key, right? Just keep going over the material over and over again. So making flashcards, forming study groups, all of those are good practices as far as keeping up your study standards is concerned. Okay, what are some good study habits? Again, flashcards, interactive websites, there's a bunch of them. Connect itself is a great resource for you guys. Constant revision and repetition. That's what it is. You keep challenging yourself, all right? Take as many multiple choice type questions online, and they're for free. If you Google search basic anatomy and physiology questions on the endocrine system as an example, there's a bunch of websites where you can go and take these practice multiple choice type questions and then go back and fix your mistakes. And that's how you basically prepare. That's how I prepared for my USMLE exam, right? That stands for the United States Medical Licensing Examination. And you need to clear 3 steps there in order to be able to practice medicine in the United States. Step 1, step 2, and step 3, which is used to be called CSA for Clinical Skills Assessment. These were all computer-based exams all the way back when I took them in the early 2000s. And each step had 700 multiple choice type questions. They were divided into 7 blocks. Each block was 1 hour each and 100 questions in each block. It was all computer based. You had 60 minutes to answer 1 question, multiple choice type again, and then the screen flipped and the other question showed up. All right. So pretty intensive. I remember I got the worst migraine of my life after I got done with my step 1. But fortunately, I scored rather nicely on both of them. And so that's how I got my licensure to practice medicine. Okay. Till, of course, I changed my field and then went into teaching full time. My qualifications, again, basically an MD, doctor of medicine in internal medicine, and I have 5 years of hospital experience in that field. Can I record or tape your lectures? That is redundant now. I am recording the lectures for you. Yes, you can upload those lectures if you want. If you still have questions, the best place to reach me again is my email address, which is reiterated here. And again, you can use my Gmail address as well. If you add a little my.tccd.edu, that again, it should reach me. Just make sure you spell my name right, okay? All right, so that was your frequently asked questions section here. So let me quickly make a check as to see if I'm missing anything. All right. Okay, so yes, seems like that is pretty much it. Again, I'll come to the lab section later on and explain that to you. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with our discussion of the first topic, and that is the endocrine system. So here you can see it, right? And again, making sure that it's recording here. Okay, all right, chapter 17, the endocrine system. So let's go ahead and start with our first slide here. So the question arises, what is the endocrine system? Okay, it always helps if you break down a term in its root words. Okay, so endocrine, again, is made up of two root terms here, endo and crine. Okay, so what does that mean? Endo, as you guys might already know, means inside, right? Endo is inwards or inside. And so I will be taking down notes here on my notebook as well, and then sharing a picture with you. Crine actually comes from an ancient word, a crinian. And crinian actually means secretions, okay? Crine means secretions. So taken together, endocrine means inside secretions, things that are being secreted or produced inside of your body, okay? So then you might ask, okay, if you have inside secretions, endocrine, is there any such thing as outside secretions or exocrine? Certainly there are, okay? Exo again means exit, exo, outside, crine, secretion. So let's think of a few secretions that are ejected or secreted outside of the body. Sweat, right? Sweat. And sweat comes through your sweat glands and sweat ducts. So that would be exocrine system, okay? The sweat that is being secreted by your sweat glands. The skin oils that we have, something called sebum. So those are secreted by oil glands, also called sebaceous glands, and they are being secreted to the outside of the surface of the human body. So that's exocrine secretion. What else do you secrete? Saliva in your mouth. So these are produced by your salivary glands, and those salivary ducts actually convey the saliva into the mouth at specific points. That is, again, an exocrine gland. Your tear glands in the eyes, right? The lacrimal glands, that's what they're called, exocrine glands. Also, if you look at the female breast when she's lactating, producing milk, that's an example of an exocrine gland as well. Those lactiferous ducts actually produce milk and secrete them to the outside. Your reproductive secretions, the prostate secretions in a male, right? That become part of the semen. That's an exocrine secretion. The vaginal secretions in females, all of those. So exocrine glands have ducts or tubes that carry the secretions to specific points in the human body, right? Like the tear glands or the tear ducts will take their secretions to the eye, to the surface of the eye, the salivary glands into the mouth, the sweat glands to the surface of the skin, your intestinal, for example, your duodenal glands in the duodenum into your second small intestine, okay? So specific parts of the human body. On the other hand, when you talk about endocrine glands, they do not have ducts. So remember that. Endocrine glands are ductless. They do not have tubes. They simply secrete or pump out their secretions into your bloodstream, okay? And so what are secretions from your endocrine glands? They are called hormones. And hormones themselves, the word means to excite. Hormones are chemical messengers that excite your body into growth and development and metabolizing and reproduction. Four things: growth, development, metabolism, and reproduction. These four things happen with the hormones that are secreted by the endocrine glands. Again, what are some examples of endocrine glands? Think of your thyroid gland. The thyroid is this butterfly-shaped gland in your neck, right here, right next to your windpipe. This is your windpipe. You can feel it with your thumb. Just under the Adam's apple, right? This tube-like structure, that's the trachea or the windpipe. So right next to the trachea is this slightly anterior, which means in front of it is your thyroid gland, and your thyroid gland secretes your thyroid hormones, right? Which are two, basically, T3 and T4. T3 for triiodothyronine, T4 for thyroxine. And we'll look at those later during our lecture here. So, so those two hormones control your metabolism, okay? They control how hot you feel at any given time or how cold, how fast you burn calories or how slow you burn those. All of those are regulated by your thyroid hormones, your thyroid gland. If you have too much of those secretions, then you have hyperthyroidism. All right. If you have too little of those secretions, then that's called hypothyroid, under function. All right. So endocrine glands secrete secretions without any ducts or glands, without any ducts or what do you call tubes, directly into your bloodstream. Okay. And their secretions are confined to the inside of the body, like the thyroid gland, like your thymus in the chest, right? That's an endocrine gland. Like the pituitary gland, which is the chief endocrine gland at the base of your brain. It secretes all of its hormones within the body into the bloodstream. Okay. All right. So that's pretty much what we are looking at here. And one more thing is a comparison here between the endocrine system and the nervous system. So how are these two the same, similar, and how are those two different? That's what we are looking at. So there's quite a few differences and there are quite a few similarities. Let's start with the similarities. Both endocrine and nervous system is made up of a network or channel of communication channels, right? For your nervous system, those are called nerves. Nerves carry signals to the brain and from the brain to the rest of the body, right? In the endocrine system, you have hormones. You have hormones that carry signals back and forth between the endocrine glands and the rest of the body. So they're communication devices, both nervous and endocrine systems, right? So what are some of the differences between the two? Nervous system is much faster because nervous system communicates by means of electrical impulses. And how fast is electricity? We all know it's extremely fast. The next time you flip on your light switch, right? It takes what, a fraction of a second for you to do that and the light to come off. So it's extremely fast, right? As far as the endocrine system secretions are concerned, which are hormones, they can take much longer, from minutes to hours to days to sometimes years. Think of the growth hormone as an example that is secreted from your pituitary gland at the base of the brain, right? And think back to your teenage years. How long did it take you to attain your full adult height? It took years, right? And so these hormones have a much shorter response time and much longer response time rather, right, as compared to the nervous system. So nerves communicate by means of electricity, endocrine glands communicate by means of chemicals called hormones, okay? Nerves also carry their signals to specific points, right? For example, a given skeletal muscle nerve will only stimulate a skeletal muscle in your arm or something. But the endocrine hormones, they have wide-reaching impacts in your body. For example, the growth hormone not only acts on your muscles and bones and tissues, but also on ligaments, tendons, right? Basically, also cause your red blood cells to grow in number. So taken together, the endocrine system has much more far-reaching, widespread effects as compared to the nervous system. All right, so here are some of the functions of the endocrine system, or the physiology of the endocrine system, okay? It does all of this. It controls your development, growth, metabolism, your blood composition and volume, digestive processes, reproductive activities, all of that, all right? So which ones control what? Growth and development. Some examples: the growth hormone, the name says it all, right? Where is it secreted from? From your pituitary gland at the base of the brain, all right? The pituitary gland is this small pea-sized and pea-shaped gland, which is the so-called CEO, okay, the chief gland, the master gland of your endocrine system, okay? So that's the growth hormone as an example. Thyroid hormones also control growth and development, all right, and metabolism, as you see here. How about blood composition and volume? Again, many other hormones are involved with that as well. For example, a hormone called ADH, that stands for anti-diuretic hormone. And the name says it all, anti-diuretic. It prevents you from urinating, okay? In other words, this hormone reabsorbs water from your kidneys so you do not urinate as much water out. So under what conditions would you need ADH in your system? When you're dehydrated. When you're low on water, you don't want to lose any water by urinating. So that's when ADH secretion picks up. Where is ADH secreted from? From your posterior pituitary, or the back portion of your pituitary gland, all right? Okay, so that would be one example. And the more ADH that you have in the system, the more water you are holding back. You're conserving more water in your system. So what does that do to your blood composition? It makes your blood more dilute, thinner, right? When you're dehydrated, when you do not have enough ADH and you have lost a lot of urine and water, then the blood becomes thick because it's lost water. So the blood viscosity or the thickness of blood goes up. So those are just some examples as you see here. What kind of hormones control your digestive system? There's a number of them, right? For example, you have a hormone called cholecystokinin or CCK that we will talk about when we come to the digestive system. And what this hormone does is it increases your secretion of digestive juices in your intestines and also the secretion of bile. Bile is this greenish bitter fluid which is made by your liver, stored in your gallbladder, and secreted when you eat fatty foods. Okay, so that would be one example. What other hormones? A hormone called gastrin, and anything with that prefix gastro, gastrin, gastritis, gastric, whatever, it has to do with the stomach. So what gastrin does is it enhances, increases your acid, stomach acid production. Okay. Reproductive activities. What kinds of hormones control your reproductive activities? Probably the most well-known of all would be testosterone. Testosterone is the male sex hormone. Females have it too, only in amounts 10 times less than that of an average male. And testosterone is secreted by the testicles of the male or the ovaries of the female in much smaller amounts. And what testosterone does is it controls your reproductive activities and functions, okay? All right, so let's see if we can answer these questions here. Explain how hormones are moved between an endocrine gland and its target organs. So how? Bloodstream. Remember, the endocrine glands simply pump out the hormones in your bloodstream, and wherever your blood goes, these hormones travel with the blood flow, okay? And that's why it's so important that you exercise. The more you exercise, the more physically active you are, the better your blood circulation to all parts of the body, the better these hormones can be transported and do their job efficiently, okay? So get your exercise. Sitting down for long periods of time, not good for health. Actually, sitting an extra hour every day, if you add all of that up, it robs upwards of 7 to 8 hours of your life on an average, okay? So it can actually kill you in the long run, sitting for too long. So make sure that you always make time every day to get up and to move around and to make sure that your circulation is in good order, okay? All right, so just take quick notes here. So for example, sitting greater than an hour per day, and that results in, takes away on an average 7 to 8 years of your life. Right. Okay, so how does the endocrine system differ from the nervous system? The endocrine system communicates by means of hormones. The nervous system communicates by means of electrical impulses. The endocrine system is much slower, takes anywhere from minutes to hours, days to sometimes years for all of its actions to show. Nervous system works super fast, okay? Okay, diabetes mellitus is noted by sustained high blood glucose levels. Which of the 4 functions listed is the most directly affected? There are no 4 functions listed here, so I'm not sure which ones they're referring to. Diabetes, of course, is a problem of sugar metabolism. When your sugar levels, blood glucose levels are high, and that has to do with problems with insulin secretion. Either you're not making any insulin, which is, again, a hormone, a protein, endocrine hormone secreted by a gland called the pancreas, which is found here in the left portion of your left hypogastrium. That's the typical, the technical name for the region, right? Your left part of the abdomen. And what insulin does is it causes sugar to be metabolized, okay? All right, so here we are looking at the endocrine glands and some examples, okay? All right, so interestingly, if you look at this figure here, figure 17.2, look at the left-hand side, and it says major endocrine glands, right, in light green. Right-hand side says organs slash tissues containing endocrine cells. So what you're looking at on the left-hand side are also called your primary endocrine glands. Now, and the ones that you're looking at on the right-hand side are called secondary endocrine glands. What's the difference between the two? Primary endocrine glands, such as here, all they do is secrete hormones. Their function is purely endocrine based, all right? All they do is secrete hormones that affect the growth and development and metabolism and reproduction of the human body. The secondary endocrine glands that you can see on the right-hand side here in blue, now these are organs that do have some endocrine function. In other words, they do secrete some hormones, but they have many other important functions as well, not only secretion of hormones, okay? For example, let's talk about the hypothalamus that you see here, okay? And the hypothalamus is this tiny area again at the base of this egg-shaped region called the thalamus of the brain. And what the hypothalamus does is it controls your pituitary gland, okay? The hypothalamus secretes what are called certain releasing hormones, RH for releasing hormones, okay? Such as CRH as an example that stands for corticotropin releasing hormone. So the CRH from your hypothalamus will affect your pituitary gland and cause your pituitary gland to release another hormone called ACTH, and that stands for adrenocorticotropic hormone, okay? And then the ACTH would basically go all the way down to your adrenal glands, which are found on the top of your kidneys, the two kidneys here, and then they secrete their hormones, okay? So it's like a three-ring circus, 3 steps. The hypothalamus up here releases the releasing hormone. They act on the pituitary gland right underneath here. Then the pituitary gland secretes its own hormones in response to the hypothalamic hormones called the pituitary hormones. And then those hormones act on a third organ elsewhere. So it's a 3-ring circus that you have here in your endocrine glands. All right, so even though the hypothalamus controls your pituitary glands by secreting those releasing and sometimes inhibiting hormones, hypothalamus also has many other important functions. For example, the hypothalamus is your body's thermostat, okay? It's that part of your brain that actually controls your body temperature, okay? And it does it wonderfully well. We all know that our core body temperature in humans is about 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. It doesn't change much, regardless of whether you're sitting in a desert cooking alive or whether you're out on a tundra on a blustery day and your body temperature is rapidly plummeting. So the hypothalamus actually picks up all of that. And so when you're hot, it makes you sweat to lower the body temperature. When it's cold, it makes you shiver to increase the body temperature, all right? So it's trying to maintain that set thermostat, which is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit here. This is something called homeostasis, extremely important term, homeostasis. Homeo means same, stasis means standing still. So what homeostasis actually means is maintaining your body conditions constant, like your temperature, keep it at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Don't let it change too much. Your glucose or blood sugar concentration should be in between 60 to 110 milligrams per deciliter, not change much. Your water levels, again, those narrow limits. So to stay alive, you have to maintain your body conditions in those narrow limits, okay? And that's what homeostasis is all about. The other word that you have to be familiar with is something called negative feedback. What does that mean? Simple. If the levels of any substance go too high, you have to bring it down, back to the baseline. If it gets too low, then you have to increase the production till it reaches that baseline. That's negative feedback, all right? So again, basically you're regulating, self-regulating your body systems, and that is what maintains life. When there is problems with homeostasis, when your thermostat or your body regulating mechanisms fail, that's when you develop the 3Ds, disease, disorder, and if still untreated, death, all right? So the 3Ds happen when your homeostasis is disturbed, okay? Disturbed. Homeostasis equals the 3Ds, right? Which are disease, disorders, and then death. Okay. So there you go. Hypothalamus has other functions too. Same with your skin, right? So you might be thinking, okay, so we know that skin protects us from microorganisms, from germs. Skin also is waterproof, so it keeps the water in, it prevents dehydration. But what is the endocrine function of skin? What hormone does it make? So the answer is vitamin D, which in itself is a hormone. Our skin can actually make vitamin D when it's exposed to sunlight, okay? And everyone should aim for getting some sun, at least 5 to 10 minutes of sunlight every single day. More so when it's like winter time, you don't get to see too much sun anyway. That's when you have to expose your skin to the sun, okay? And then again, you have to be careful about the amount of time that you're spending exposing your skin to direct sunlight, especially if you're light skinned, blonde hair, blue eyed configuration. Then you have to be careful because then you tend to get sunburned easily, and prolonged sun exposure will lead to sunburn, and you have a high risk of skin cancer. Again, skin cancer like malignant melanoma. And malignant melanoma is one of those cancers that has been on the rise, more so than any other cancer, right? So the most rapid rise of all cancers seen in recent years has been in this type, malignant melanoma, okay? Skin cancer. And why is that? Well, there's a number of factors responsible. First, more and more people getting a nice tan is more in fashion, right? Back in the 1800s, as an example, in the 19th century, having a paler complexion was actually a sign of being belonging to the higher class, to the aristocrats, right? Only peasants who worked out in fields and stuff, they had the tan. But that changed now. Now sporting a healthy tan is a sign of status almost, right? So more and more people are exposing their skin to the sun, number one. Number two, ozone layer. Ozone layer is basically, it's made up of a gas called ozone, which is the chemical formula is O3 for that gas, all right? So that's the ozone layer. And the ozone layer, what it does is it protects us from the sun's harmful ultraviolet radiation. It filters out the sun's cancer-causing rays, right? But thanks to our use of chemicals called CFCs, okay? And CFCs stand for chlorofluorocarbons. And chlorofluorocarbons are these chemicals that were previously used in the manufacture of everything from air conditioners to refrigerators to even aerosol spray paints, right? But what we did not realize was that CFCs, this is like a gas, right? So they rise high up in the atmosphere once you use them, and then they interact with the ozone layer high up in the sky, in the stratosphere, right? Above the atmosphere, in the higher atmosphere of the Earth, and they cause a deterioration, a breakdown of the ozone layer. So we are losing ozone layer, and so that means more and more of sun's harmful ultraviolet radiation is reaching us now. The hole in the ozone layer is as big as the continent of Antarctica at present, which is the largest continent, okay? That's a massive hole. So all of this unfiltered sunlight is coming down. The third reason why there's this significant increase in skin cancer and malignant melanoma is more and more people are getting diagnosed. We have better medical diagnostic facilities, so we catch cancers earlier as well, all right? Okay, so there you have it. Skin also makes vitamin D, which is a hormone, so that's the endocrine function, but skin also protects us from microorganisms and dehydration, right? Same with the heart. The heart pumps blood, everyone knows that, but the heart also secretes a hormone called ANP. That stands for atrial natriuretic peptide. We'll come across it later on. And what that hormone does is, if there's too much blood returning to the heart, because you have too much water retention in your system, okay? Such as when you have heart failure, congestive heart failure, that holds back a whole lot of water. Your kidneys fail, you're not urinating as much, you need dialysis. So all of that extra fluid goes back to your heart. So your heart responds by secreting ANP, which causes you to urinate that extra water out. Patients of congestive heart failure also get treated with ANP. So doctors, cardiologists give them drips or injections of artificial synthetic atrial natriuretic peptide or ANP to get rid of the extra water, okay? Same with the stomach. The stomach secretes acid to break down food, to digest it, but the stomach also secretes a hormone called gastrin, as I mentioned before, which increases stomach acid secretion as well, okay? Testes in males, the reproductive glands, testes secrete what? They make sperm. That's their primary function. But testes also secrete testosterone, which is a hormone. So that's the endocrine function. So remember, same with ovaries. Ovaries secrete an egg every month in the female menstrual cycle, but the ovaries also secrete estrogen, which is the female sex hormone. So these are secondary endocrine glands, and these are primary endocrine glands. These only secrete hormones, okay? Okay, so next up, what we are seeing here is what are some of the ways that hormone secretion is stimulated in the endocrine glands. What causes your endocrine glands to make and stimulate and secrete hormones? All right, so there's three ways of doing it: hormonal stimulation, humoral stimulation, and nervous system stimulation. What's the difference between each? Hormonal stimulation simply means that a hormone from somewhere else is causing this endocrine gland to secrete its own hormone. As an example, take a look here. What are you looking at? This is the pituitary gland at the base of the brain, right? It has a front portion called the anterior pituitary, and then a back portion here called the posterior pituitary. What is right on top of your pituitary gland? Hypothalamus. This is the hypothalamus, okay? So what happens here? The hypothalamus secretes a hormone called TRH, for thyroid releasing hormone, TRH. That TRH travels from the hypothalamus down here to the anterior pituitary and stimulates the anterior pituitary to release its own hormone called TSH. And the TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. Then this thyroid stimulating hormone in green, these green triangles here, they move all the way down here to the thyroid gland, which is this butterfly-shaped gland in your neck, as I mentioned. And then they stimulate your thyroid gland to secrete their own thyroid hormones, which are T3 and T4, right? So in other words, each endocrine gland is secreting its hormone in response to another hormone from somewhere else. That's what hormonal stimulation is. Okay, so then what is humoral stimulation? Humoral stimulation is when the levels of a certain ion in your bloodstream or the levels of some nutrient in your bloodstream cause a hormone secretion. So let's talk about insulin here, right? Insulin is what? It's a protein hormone that is secreted by your pancreas. Here's your pancreas. This is what it looks like, right? And so, so what happens is whenever you eat a meal, your blood sugar levels go up right after that, right? So there's high levels of glucose stimulate your pancreas to secrete insulin, which is these yellow triangles here. What insulin does is it causes your extra sugar to be pushed into your cells. So it brings your sugar levels down. Diabetics have an issue with insulin, right? They don't have enough insulin, or the insulin is not doing its job properly. So the result is their blood glucose levels are perpetually high. And that can cause all kinds of problems. High sugar means high infections, your wounds don't heal properly, right? You're always thirsty, all those kinds of things. Okay, and the final type of stimulation is something called nervous system stimulation, which means that your endocrine gland is secreting its hormones in response to some nerve stimulation. What are you looking at here? Your adrenal gland, right on top of the kidney. This is the adrenal gland, okay? So what does adrenal gland secrete? A hormone that we all know all too well, adrenaline. Adrenaline, that's our fight or flight hormone, right? So the adrenaline is secreted in response to some electrical impulses from your spinal cord, okay? So here, this is a nervous impulse that is causing these hormones to be secreted. So that is nervous system stimulation. Again, adrenaline would be a perfect example, right? So you're in your bed at night and you hear some suspicious sound or something and your pupils dilate, your hair stand on end and your heart starts to pump rapidly, start breathing, and there's this surge of glucose levels in your blood, all of that, right? The classic fight or flight response. That's because your spinal cord just shot some electrical impulses into your adrenal gland, and following the laws of nervous system stimulation, your adrenal gland secreted adrenaline that caused you to go in that fight or flight mode. Okay, answers to these questions. What are the major endocrine organs in the human body? All right, let's count them from the top. Pituitary gland, right up here, right? Then the thyroid gland in the neck, then the thymus in the chest, right? Then the pancreas, which is in the abdomen, right? Then the adrenal glands, which are on top of your kidneys, then the testicles and the ovaries in the pelvis down there, okay? What are the organs that have another primary function and contain endocrine cells? So these would be our secondary glands that we saw before, the hypothalamus, skin, stomach, liver, right? Uh, all of those. ACTH, which stands for adrenocorticotropic hormone, stimulates the adrenal cortex to release cortisol hormone. This is an example of what type of stimulation: hormonal, humoral, or nervous system. So here you're having one type of hormone secrete another or stimulate the secretion of another type of hormone. So this is hormonal stimulation, A, right? All right, so, okay. So next up here, we are talking about different types of hormones, what makes them and how do they function, okay? So the first class of hormones that we are looking at here are what are called steroids. And when you hear steroids, a lot of people think of bodybuilders and these pumped up, buff people, right? And illegal, illicit substances that people are taking in. Keep in mind that we make steroids within our bodies as well. So we are not necessarily talking about the exogenous, the controlled substance steroids, all right? Steroids are a class of hormones which are derived from fats or lipids, fatty acid or lipid-derived hormones. They are called steroids, all right? So which organs primarily in your body use fats or lipids to make hormones? Your liver and your gonads, your sex glands like ovaries and testes, okay? So these are the two prime examples of organs that will make steroids, all right? Also kidneys, they make steroids as well, the adrenal glands, okay? So as we can see here, what are steroids? Fat-derived molecules. And when we say fat-derived, we're talking about cholesterol, especially. Cholesterol is a fatty substance found only in animal tissue. Plants do not have cholesterol. So if you're a vegan, as an example, and all you eat is plants and plant-based foods, you're not getting any cholesterol in your diet. But that's not any cause for concern because our livers can make all the cholesterol that we need as long as you're eating your balanced meal, even if you're a vegan, okay? On top of what your liver already is making, you can consume small quantities of cholesterol. The problem is the average American diet, we don't know the meaning of small portions of cholesterol, right? So we are taking a whole lot more cholesterol on top of what our livers are already making. And so that is causing problems with, and cholesterol is this thick, waxy, almost candle wax-like substance. When you have too much of that fatty animal tissue, it clogs up your blood vessels, especially your coronary blood vessels in the heart and the cerebral blood vessels in the brain, causing heart attacks and strokes, the two main killers, chief killers of humans across the planet. COVID-19 is coming at a close third now, okay, interestingly, which is an infection. All right, so what are some examples of steroid-based hormones? Your sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen, as you can see. Also, some hormones secreted by your adrenal cortex, the outer part of your adrenal glands, on top of your kidneys. For example, a hormone called cortisol. The cortisol is also called your stress hormone. When you're stressed, your adrenal gland secretes this hormone called cortisol. It causes your blood sugar levels to go high. So keep in mind, if you are stressed for long periods of time, you can literally develop diabetes, stress-induced diabetes, right? So high stress equals increased cortisol, and that causes diabetes mellitus, okay? That's what it does. And it also suppresses your immune system. So ever noticed how you fall sick quite often with colds and sore throat and whatnot when you're stressed, studying for an exam or some other stressful situation in your life? That's again because of high levels of cortisol, okay? Calcitriol, sometimes classified in this group as well, okay? So this is a type of vitamin D again, calcitriol, okay? That's vitamin D. So these are all examples of steroid-based hormones. Okay. Another class of hormones are what are called biogenic amines, okay? So if you look at the word itself, what does it mean? Biogenic, bio means life. So only living things make these hormones, all right? Biogenic. Amines, they contain an amino group. And what is an amino group? NH2. Look here, you see that NH2, one nitrogen, two hydrogens, that's an amine group. So biogenic amines like these. So these are modified amino acids, right? That make these types of hormones. What are some examples of biogenic amines? Your thyroid hormones, uh, and also adrenaline. Adrenaline as an example. Catecholamines, adrenaline is an example of a biogenic amine as well. Your sleep hormone called melatonin, right? Melatonin is secreted by a gland called the pineal gland at the base of your brain as well. And melatonin puts you to sleep. And many people take over the counter melatonin. People who suffer from insomnia. Insomnia is an inability to fall asleep or stay asleep or waking up too early or waking up feeling unrefreshed. A lot of people take over-the-counter melatonin. There are no studies that have shown that over-the-counter melatonin is any more effective than just not taking anything, right? It's more of a placebo effect, okay? So over-the-counter melatonin is more of a placebo effect. What is a placebo effect? It's purely psychological, right? In other words, if you think that certain substances or drugs or whatever are going to help you, well, then you feel that they help you because you've convinced yourself. And so it's mind over matter kind of thing, okay? And if it works for you, then take all the melatonin that you want, not all the melatonin, but whatever the recommended dose is. But mostly that is a placebo effect, all right? So studies have shown that almost all of the supplements, none of them have any proven benefit, okay? The only exceptions would be, well, the multivitamins that you take, especially for pregnant women, they need that, of course. And then fish liver oil, omega-3 fatty acids. Fish liver oil has been shown to reduce the levels of triglycerides in your system. Triglycerides is too many calories. If you're consuming way too many calories and not expending as much, then your triglyceride levels go up, all right? So fish liver oil helps stabilize those. Okay. So the other thing to remember is, going back here to steroids, these fat-based hormones like steroids, they are soluble or they can dissolve in fats. They're lipid soluble, they're fat soluble. They do not dissolve in water, but they dissolve in fats, okay? Which means they can pass easily across your cell membranes because your cell membrane is lipid-based, right? It's lipid, it's fats. Biogenic amines are water soluble, so they cannot pass easily across your cell membrane because, again, cell membrane is fatty, right? It's lipid-based and lipid and water don't mix, so they can pass. And then you have the protein hormones. And this is the widest category. The most hormones are protein type. And so these are water soluble as well. And here are some examples of what those water soluble hormones are. ADH, like antidiuretic hormone, insulin, glucagon, growth hormone, erythropoietin, all of them. These are protein hormones. Okay. Then you have these substances called eicosanoids, and these are local hormones, meaning these are hormones which are secreted by cells in different parts of the body, but they don't travel too far. They just act on the surrounding tissues, okay? And some examples of those are things like prostaglandins. Prostaglandins, again, are these local hormones, and they are involved with pain. Whenever you feel pain, okay, or inflammation, again, pain is a part of inflammation. Prostaglandins are secreted there, and these are, again, examples of local hormones called eicosanoids, as you can see here. All right. So identify which of the following hormone categories are lipid soluble. Reproductive hormones produced in the gonads, like testosterone and estrogen, they are lipid soluble, they are steroids. Adrenal cortex hormones, steroids, lipid soluble, yes. Thyroid hormone is a biogenic amine, and that's a water soluble hormone. It's not lipid soluble. What two events or processes associated with the hormone are influenced by whether the hormone is lipid soluble or water soluble? Okay, so think about it. If a hormone is water soluble, you can simply pee it out in your urine, right? So water soluble hormones can easily be excreted from the body by means of urine. Lipid soluble or fat soluble hormones stay longer in your body because they stay dissolved in your fat, like testosterone. The average half-life of testosterone is about 12 days. On the other hand, if you have adrenaline in your system, which is a biogenic amine, it's water soluble, how long does adrenaline function, your fight or flight response? No more than 10 to 15 minutes. And then you excrete it you urinate that out because it's a water-soluble hormone. Okay. So then leukotrienes from damaged tissue cause smooth muscle in local blood vessels to vasodilate. Is this vasodilate? They become larger, wider. Is this an example of autocrine stimulation or paracrine stimulation? Okay. So autocrine means the same cell that secreted the hormone is stimulating the same cell itself. Paracrine means the hormone secreted from a tissue is acting on the surrounding tissue. So this is an example of a paracrine stimulation. The surrounding tissue is being affected here. Okay, so next up, we are going to take a look at how these different hormones are transported in your blood. So let's start with the lipid-soluble hormones first, like steroids. So the lipid-soluble hormones, first step, they need to be carried by carriers, okay? Because they're fat-soluble, so they cannot travel by themselves. They are always attached to some proteins, some water-soluble proteins, which are made by the liver. And that's why you do not have testosterone, as an example, just floating around freely in your body. 95% of your testosterone, which is a lipid hormone again, fat hormone, it is bound to those proteins made by the liver, right? Those are called lipoproteins, because proteins that bind to lipids like fatty hormones, okay? Only 5% of the testosterone is free testosterone. And that 5% of free testosterone is what makes you into a man, gives you those masculine characteristics. 90 to 95% of the testosterone is bind to those proteins made by the liver, as you see here, okay? Water-soluble hormones, on the other hand, like the thyroid hormone or growth hormone, they can travel freely all across the blood, and they also are excreted easily because you can simply urinate them out. That's something that we see here. So what is the half-life of a hormone? The time that a hormone stays in your bloodstream. So which one has a longer half-life? A lipid-soluble hormone or a water-soluble hormone? Of course, a lipid-soluble hormone has a much longer half-life because it cannot simply dissolve in your urine and be excreted out, okay? On the other hand, the water-soluble hormones have much shorter half-lives. Excuse me. Excuse me. Because they're water-soluble and so they can be urinated out easily. Okay, so why are carrier proteins necessary for lipid-soluble hormones? Because they are not water-soluble, they need to be carried by some proteins. What is the added benefit of a carrier protein? A carrier protein can also maintain the levels of the hormone for a longer period of time, okay? As I mentioned before, 95% of your testosterone is bound to a protein. It's bound testosterone, only 5% is free. So it has a longer half-life. What is the relationship of hormone synthesis to the concentration of that hormone in the blood? Simple. The greater the hormone synthesis, the more hormone that is being made, the higher the concentration of that hormone in the blood, all right? Or the lower the amount of hormone that is being made, the lower the level of that hormone. That's simple. Okay. So next up, we are looking at how do these different types of hormones cause their effects in your cells. So let's start with the lipid-soluble hormones first. Let's take estrogen or testosterone, your sex hormones, as an example. How do those work, okay? So if you look here in this picture, all right, what do we see? Look, here's your testosterone and it is bound to a protein. This blue stuff here is a protein. This yellow little particle in the middle, that's the hormone. It's attached to the protein carrier, right? So the protein carrier comes close to your cell here and it releases that hormone, the fat-soluble hormone, that is. The fat-soluble hormone, look at that. It can pass easily across your cell membranes, no problem. Because again, your cell membrane is a phospholipid bilayer. It's made up of fats. So this fat hormone easily passes across the fatty cell membrane. Then what does it do? Once inside of the cell, it binds to another protein, which is called a hormone receptor. So once it binds to the hormone receptor, now it's called a hormone receptor complex here. The hormone receptor complex is able to pass easily inside the nucleus of the cell. This is the nucleus. This is the nuclear membrane. on the nuclear envelope that you see, and you see that there's holes in the nuclear membrane. These are called nuclear pores, right? So the hormone receptor complex can pass easily across through these nuclear pores into the nucleus. What is inside of the nucleus? Your DNA here. So now this lipid soluble hormone gets to your DNA, and in fact, it affects the way your DNA makes messenger RNA and makes proteins from then on, okay? So in other words, this lipid hormone has affected the way your DNA is transcribing proteins or making proteins for this cell. So this is the whole cycle of how lipid soluble hormones work, okay? All right. So now how about the water soluble hormones? The water soluble hormones have a harder time getting inside of the cells because remember, water cannot pass across the fat, the phospholipid bilayer of the cell membrane. So there are a number of steps that are involved here. Let me close the window before I get any more sneezes. Seems like there's some pollen in the air. Okay. All right, so this is how it goes. There's your water soluble hormone. You see that green triangle, right? So here's your cell membrane. Now this water soluble hormone cannot pass right across the cell membrane. Instead, it binds to a receptor protein. You see it here. Once it binds to the receptor protein, you can see it has clicked into place. That receptor gets activated, okay? This is activation, as you can see. Then what happens here is something called a G protein, which is this purple stuff here. This binds to this activated receptor. And what the G protein does is it changes, it causes a second messenger called the GTP, this one here, to bind to the G protein, okay? This GTP binds to the G protein. It gets activated then, and what the activated G protein does is it then acts as a second messenger, and then it causes whatever change needs to be caused inside of the cell membrane, all right? So as you can see, this is a much longer process than the steroid hormones. The steroid hormone were able to pass directly across the cell membrane, get to your DNA, cause DNA changes in protein synthesis, right? But the water-soluble hormone has to go to the receptor protein, then the G protein, then the second messenger, which is the GTP, as you can see here. So it's a much longer process, okay? So here we are looking at this whole water-soluble hormone activation sequence, as you can see here, all of the steps involved. One thing that you have to remember from this is your second messenger that will cause changes in the cell is CAMP, cyclic adenosine monophosphate, CAMP. This is your second messenger. That's an important thing to remember here, okay? So again, if you look here at the picture, eventually you will get to CAMP, cyclic adenosine monophosphate, that will act as your second messenger and cause certain changes inside of the cell, as you can see. Okay, so how do you compare the activity of the water-soluble hormone with the lipid-soluble or fat-soluble hormones? Water-soluble hormones act, they are excreted from the body much faster, right? And what they do is they can cause any or all of these changes. They can activate or inhibit certain enzymes. They can cause growth to happen. They can cause certain secretions to be secreted from the cells. They can change the permeability of the membrane. They can also act on your muscles, causing them to contract or relax, okay? So all of these are actions of the water-soluble hormones that can happen. Okay, so let's try to answer these questions. Where are lipid-soluble hormone receptors located? So these receptors are located inside of the cell. If you remember, it was in the cytoplasm. That's where the lipid-soluble hormone attached to those receptors, okay? What is the general cellular change that occurs with binding of a lipid-soluble hormone? What is the cellular change? The DNA is affected and how it translates into protein. The protein synthesis is affected here. What is the specific role of the protein kinase enzymes in the signal transduction pathway initiated by water-soluble hormones? The protein kinase enzyme activates the addition of phosphates, either the addition of phosphate or the removal of phosphates from the system, okay? So either it will increase metabolism or decrease metabolism, depending on whatever the body wants at that specific point in time. Okay, so we are looking at two other terms, upregulation versus downregulation, okay? So what does that basically mean? Okay, so what upregulation means is this. Uh, let's say you are short on a certain hormone, let's say on growth hormone, right? You don't have enough growth hormone being secreted, and so you are kind of like a midget and no increase in height and all that. So how your body will respond to these decreased levels of growth hormones is it will increase the number of receptors available to attach that hormone, all right? Because you're on the lookout for any growth hormone that you can get. So your body amps up its production of those receptors, and that's called upregulation. And what happens on the very other end? At the other extreme, you might have too much growth hormone. So think of all these giant NBA players, people who suffer from gigantism, which is an oversecretion of growth hormone. So when anything like that happens, then the number of your receptors for the growth hormone will go down because you don't need as much growth hormone. So that's called downregulation. What is this an example of? Upregulation and downregulation? Homeostasis, negative feedback again, right? Your body is trying to maintain just the right level of a given hormone. All right. Okay, so here in this picture, you can see what is upregulation and what is downregulation. See, there's not too much of that green hormone. Thank you. Here in the picture, so a whole lot more receptors are popping up all across the cell, so it can steal as much hormone as it can. On the other hand, there's a whole lot of hormone available all around, so the number of receptors have gone down because there's too much hormone there, okay? So upregulation versus downregulation. Okay, so then what we have here is how hormones might work together, right? So you have something called synergistic interaction versus permissive versus antagonistic interactions. What's the difference? Synergy means working together, okay? So synergistic interaction literally means that one hormone helps another hormone do its job. For example, estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen is the female sex hormone. Progesterone is the so-called pregnancy hormone. You need one to augment the effects of the other hormone. They work together, right? During your menstrual cycle also, estrogen levels are high for the first 14 days of your cycle, then progesterone levels start to rise for the rest of the 14 days, the last 14 days of your cycle. They work hand in hand, okay? And the function of both estrogen and progesterone is to prepare your body for pregnancy and lactation, okay? Permissive interaction, when one hormone requires the activity of another hormone. And the example given here is oxytocin and prolactin, those two hormones. What is oxytocin? It's a protein hormone secreted by your posterior pituitary, the back of the pituitary gland. What oxytocin does is it causes smooth muscle contraction throughout your system. That includes smooth muscle in your uterus. So this is your birth hormone too, right? The labor contractions that you get in the uterus, it's oxytocin from your posterior pituitary. Oxytocin also causes your milk to be secreted from the breast, from the female breast, okay? Under rare circumstances, male breast, you can have a similar situation. We'll get to that clinical picture at a later time as well. But oxytocin will not cause any milk ejection or projection or production unless another hormone called prolactin, and prolactin is secreted by your anterior pituitary, the front part of your pituitary. And what prolactin does is it causes milk to be synthesized, to be made in the breasts in the first place. Look at the name prolactin. It promotes lactation or milk production. So prolactin makes milk, and then oxytocin causes that milk to be expressed from the breast. And that's why you have to put the baby to the breast regularly, especially if you're a first-time mom. The more regularly you're putting the baby to the breast, the faster the milk flow established. Again, this is actually a positive feedback cycle that we will talk about shortly here. So then you have antagonistic interactions, which means one hormone suppresses or inhibits the secretion of another hormone. All right, so they work in opposite directions. The example given here is glucagon and insulin. Insulin secreted from your pancreas from a region called the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans of your pancreas. What insulin does is it causes your blood sugar levels to go down. It causes your blood sugar to be pushed inside of the cells. Glucagon, which again is secreted by your pancreas, but from a different type of cells called the alpha cells, it increases blood sugar. It causes sugar to be pushed out of your cells, okay? So they work in opposite directions. So here you can look at the three interactions. Hormones could work synergistically, they can work in a permissive situation or antagonistically. Okay, so how does downregulation of cellular receptors change responsiveness to a given hormone? It becomes less responsive to a hormone because there's too much of that hormone. What effects are seen when hormones act synergistically? They help each other, they amplify their effects. Okay, so we are starting our study of the very first of our endocrine glands, and that is the chief gland, actually, your pituitary gland, which is found at the base of the brain. Here is it. Here is your P-shaped and P-sized pituitary gland. This is the front portion called the anterior pituitary, and this is the back part called the posterior pituitary, okay? Now, the pituitary gland, it's also called hypophysis. Hypophysis, okay? We might have seen that word here, hypophysis, hypophyseal. So hypophysis is another word for the pituitary gland here. You can see that the pituitary gland is connected to the hypothalamus. Here's the hypothalamus at the top, all right? And here's your pituitary gland. So it is connected to the hypothalamus by a band of tissue called the infundibulum. Here's the infundibulum, okay? What else do you see? You see that the anterior pituitary, this one here, is attached to the hypothalamus by means of these blood vessels, okay? These blood vessels here. The posterior pituitary, the back part here, is connected to your hypothalamus by means of nerves. So these are nerves. So this is the nervous part of the hypothalamus. This is the blood or vascular part of the hypothalamus, okay? And for this reason, the posterior pituitary is also called neurohypophysis. Neurohypophysis, meaning it is connected by nerves to the hypothalamus, okay? Something else to keep in mind. Okay, now, in the front pituitary gland, this one is also called adenohypophysis, which means the glandular part, the gland part of the hypothesis. So of the pituitary gland. So let me write it down here. Okay. So posterior pituitary is also called the neurohypophysis, while the anterior, the front part of the pituitary, is also called the adenohypophysis. Okay. All right. So what is secreted by each region? Okay, let's see. Let's start with the posterior pituitary first, because only two hormones are secreted from here, ADH and oxytocin, as you can see here, okay? Now, keep in mind that even though those two hormones are being secreted by the posterior pituitary, they're not made here. They're not synthesized here. They're actually made up here in the hypothalamus. You can see it in the picture. The hypothalamus actually synthesizes ADH and oxytocin, and then it transports them via these nerves down here into the posterior pituitary from where they're secreted, okay? So what do these two hormones do? What does ADH do? Look at the name, antidiuretic hormone. It prevents urination. Anti-diuretic hormone. This hormone goes all the way down to your kidneys and sucks back water into the system. When do you need ADH, high levels of ADH? When you are dehydrated, because you want to conserve as much water as possible. So on a hot, sweaty day is when your ADH secretion is high to control, to retain water in the system, okay? What does oxytocin do? We just talked about it. Oxytocin causes your milk expulsion from the breast. It causes birth, like labor contractions. Oxytocin is also secreted at the time of orgasm, when you have those muscle contractions in the, let's say, in the penis or in the vaginal region and the uterine region associated with the pleasurable sensations. That's oxytocin as well. Oxytocin also promotes this emotional bond between the mother and the child, even between couples, right? This emotional bond is felt because of a surge of oxytocin. Okay. All right. So that's pretty much what we are looking at here. All right. Now, so remember how we mentioned that the anterior pituitary gland here, this region, is connected to the hypothalamus by means of these blood vessels, right? And so these blood vessels make a network called a plexus, okay? So these blood vessels that make a network around the hypothalamus higher up, it's called the primary plexus, okay? Primary plexus. And then this network of blood vessels that is formed lower down, all around the anterior pituitary, that is called the secondary plexus, okay? Something else to remember. Now, why so many blood vessels attaching the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary? Because they carry a lot of hormones from the hypothalamus down to the anterior pituitary. So what are the hormones that the hypothalamus secretes, synthesizes, and sends down to the anterior pituitary? Here's a list. Look, let's take a look. Thyrotropin releasing hormone, TRH. Prolactin releasing hormone, PRH. Prolactin inhibiting hormone, PIH. Gonadotropin releasing hormone, GnRH. Corticotropin releasing hormone, CRH. Growth hormone releasing hormone, GHRH or GRH. What common theme did you see here? RH, releasing hormones. So whenever you come across a releasing hormone, no, it's likely coming from the hypothalamus, okay? And what do? These hormones go down to the anterior pituitary and they stimulate the anterior pituitary to release its own battery of hormones. So TRH from the hypothalamus will cause your anterior pituitary to release TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, which will stimulate your thyroid. The prolactin releasing hormone from your hypothalamus would stimulate your prolactin secretion from the anterior pituitary, which will cause milk production in the breast. The prolactin inhibiting hormone will inhibit the secretion of prolactin, right? The gonadotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus will cause the release of FSH or follicle stimulating hormone, which causes your ovaries to mature an egg, and also luteinizing hormone or ALH, which causes ovulation. Ovulation is when your ovary releases an egg every month, okay? So those two hormones, reproductive hormones, they are secreted under the influence of the GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. Then the corticotropin releasing hormone, CRH, will cause your anterior pituitary to release adrenocorticotropic hormone or ACTH, okay? Where will this hormone act? On the adrenal cortex, the adrenal glands on top of the kidneys. That's where this hormone will go and cause your adrenal cortex to release more hormones. And then growth hormone is also secreted from the anterior pituitary in response to the growth hormone releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. So you can see that the hypothalamus and the pituitary are intricately linked together, okay? So here you're looking at those two hormones. We talked about the action of each, ADH and oxytocin, okay? Releasing hormones, inhibiting hormones. We talked about the effects of each of those hormones as well, right? So going back, for example, gonadotropins, your sex hormones, right? Two of them secreted from your anterior pituitary, the FSH for follicle stimulating hormone. What it does is it causes, again, one of the eggs to mature in one of the follicles of your ovaries. The luteinizing hormone or LH causes that egg to be released. Your follicle bursts on day 14 of a 28-day menstrual cycle and your egg is released. And that is ovulation. What does it do in males, right? Obviously, males don't have ovaries. So what is FSH doing in males? FSH in males will cause sperm synthesis, sperm to be made, or spermatogenesis, okay? Sperm development. The luteinizing hormone, or LH, on the other hand, in males will cause testosterone secretion from the testicles, the male hormone testosterone, okay? So here you can look at the 6 hormones from the anterior pituitary gland and what those hormones do to each. The TSH goes to the thyroid hormone, okay? The prolactin goes to the breast. The FSH and LH go to the ovaries and the testicles, right? What is this? Growth hormone goes to the liver, muscles, fat cells, all over. And then your ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, goes down to your adrenal cortex and causes the secretion of adrenal hormones here. So let's take a look at a clinical picture called hypophysectomy. Okay, so this literally means cutting out the pituitary gland. Let me tell you a real life example that I came across in my medical practice. This was a 76-year-old gentleman who came to the outpatient department because he was suffering from a number of symptoms, okay? So what was happening in his case was, let me just make a quick note of the case. 76-year-old galactorrhea patient. Okay. So this gentleman, as I was mentioning, had been having episodes of blacking out over the past 6 months. So he'll just pass out and then come around and have no memory of what happened, right? So multiple blacking out episodes. He was also complaining of these recurrent headaches, right? Intense, severe headaches. He couldn't stand them anymore. He also had some nausea going on. He also had double vision, something called diplopia, right? Diplopia means double vision. He was seeing twos of everything, something that also started about 6 months back, double vision. And right, so they were all concerning signs. But on top of that, his main problem was that he was experiencing female-like breast growth. And not only that, but he was actually actively producing milk, okay? And so that was concerning for a 76-year-old man, right? So this milk production is called galactorrhea, right? Galactorrhea equals milk flow from the breast, and gynecomastia. And I'm going to send out a copy of all these notes, which means female-like breast growth in a man, right? So that is gynecomastia. And so these were troubling him, right? So before we go any further, let's talk about the difference between signs and symptoms, okay? What are signs and what are symptoms? Okay, so signs are objective. Signs are things that you can see. So a patient comes to you and you can see he has a rash on his right cheek, or she has a bluish, like a bruise on her left side of the chest, or they have redness of the skin or yellowness in jaundice or something. So signs are something that you can see. They're objective. Symptoms are what the patient reports to you, but you can see him, like feeling dizzy. You can see that, but the patient is telling you he's feeling dizzy. The patient's telling you he feels nausea. So that's a symptom, not a sign. You can see it. So symptoms are subjective. The patient tells you pain. He's having pain. You can see pain, right? So signs versus symptoms, know this difference. Signs are things that could be seen. Symptoms are subjective, what the patient reports to you. Okay, so what would you do for this patient? Okay, so a lot of people would think, well, something is going on with the breast, so let's take a breast tissues biopsy or something, right? But if you look at this complete picture, take into consideration all of this patient's signs and symptoms, then a completely different picture emerges, and you'll be looking at a very different region of the body, okay? And so certainly that's what we did, and we right away ordered a CT scan of the brain, brain CT scan, okay? And sure enough, what showed up on the CT scan was a big tumor. And a tumor is a mass which is growing in any part of the body. This patient had a tumor that was growing right around his pituitary gland, okay? Um, so this is called a pituitary adenoma, okay? A pituitary macroadenoma, which means large tumor. Large tumor of the pituitary gland. That's what it was, okay? And that was causing all the symptoms. He had a tumor not in the breast, but actually here at the base of the brain, around the pituitary gland. So, so let's trace back all of his signs and symptoms to what was going on, all right? So why the blacking out episodes? Of course, when you have a rapidly growing mass right at your brainstem, right, it's going to press down on your surrounding brain structures, including the sleep centers and the consciousness centers, which are located in the hypothalamus. So the blood supply was being cut out to his brain because of this rapidly expanding tumor. He was passing out. Pain. How do you explain for pain? Same thing. Since the tumor was growing rapidly, it was pushing a lot of pressure on the surrounding bones. And remember, the pituitary gland is surrounded by a bony structure called the sella turcica. You probably studied about that during your ANP1, right? The sella turcica. So as this mass was growing, it was putting intense pressure on the these bones. And these bones are sensitive. They have a lot of sensory nerves there, thus the intense headaches, all right? Why diplopia? Because your optic nerves, they crisscross, and they form structures called the optic chiasm just below your pituitary gland. So this tumor was also pressing down on the optic nerves. The patient was seeing twos of everything, diplopia, double vision. Nausea, same thing, because of this constant headache was causing the nausea centers of his brain to be activated, okay? Finally, why the breast growth? Why the gynecomastia and milk flow, galactorrhea? What was that all about? He was secreting abnormally high levels of prolactin and oxytocin, again, because of the pituitary tumor. So breast growth and then milk production. So his treatment was, again, a surgical procedure that you see here called hypophysectomy. We used a laser guided technique to cut out that tumor from the brain. It was a benign tumor. Fortunately, it wasn't cancer. It wasn't malignant. It was benign. So we took out the tumor, cut it out, and that took care of his signs and symptoms. But unfortunately, since a major chunk of his pituitary gland was removed, he had to be on pituitary hormone supplements for the rest of his life because he didn't have any pituitary gland to make those hormones for him. So he had to take hormone supplements for the rest of his life. You can also do the surgery through the nasal cavity. You can go all the way up through the nasal cavity and reach the pituitary gland, okay? All right, so next up is growth hormone, okay? So where is growth hormone secreted from? It's secreted from your anterior pituitary again, okay? Under the influence of growth hormone releasing hormone, which comes from higher up from your hypothalamus, okay? And the amount of growth hormone that you secrete depends on a number of factors. A person's age. You make the most growth hormone in your prepubertal years. There's a sudden spike, your maximum levels, okay? And then as you age, your levels tend to go down. Time of day. You secrete maximum growth hormone when you're deep asleep. And that's why teenagers need so much more sleep than other age groups. They're not typically being lazy. They physiologically need that extra sleep because their growth hormone levels are taking a spike, right? And that's why we all need 7 to 8 hours of sleep on a daily basis. We need that growth hormone to do its growing work, right? Nutrient levels. So when you are low on calories, right? When you're hungry for short periods of time, your growth hormone actually increases. So that's why a lot of bodybuilders do what is called intermittent fasting, right? It's quite a fad these days. So intermittent fasting is when you go without solid food for anywhere from 6 to 12 hours, depending on what you're trying to achieve, and just subsist on liquids and beverages, and that's it, right? Because that causes a sudden surge in your growth hormone levels. But prolonged starvation, prolonged fasting will cause the exact opposite effect. Your growth hormone levels will plummet. Stress and exercise, same thing. If you're exercising and you have moderate stress and controlled exercise, your growth hormone levels will go up. But too much stress and over exercising, the growth hormones will take a dip. So again, it's homeostasis. about maintaining balance. Okay, what else does growth hormone do on the different tissues of the body? So first step, liver. What does the growth hormone do with your liver? It causes your liver to secrete something called IGF. That stands for insulin-like growth factor. Okay, so insulin-like growth factor, and it does the same thing as growth hormone. Similar function as growth hormone, longer half-life. Okay, what else does a growth hormone do? Growth hormone causes, first up, something called glycogenolysis. What does this word mean, glycogenolysis? Lysis means to break down. What is being broken down? Glycogen. What is glycogen? How you store sugar in your system, right? Sugar is glucose. So how do you store sugar? Or glucose? Use sugar glucose in the form of something called glycogen in your skeletal muscles and in your liver. Those two organs, okay? So what growth hormone does is it causes that sugar to be released from your liver and your skeletal muscles. Okay, so your sugar levels go high. Therefore, too much growth hormone, and what disease do you get? What disease comes with high sugar levels? Diabetes mellitus. And therefore, no surprise that all of these gigantic NBA players, some wrestlers, right, extraordinarily tall, the Big Show and all of them, right, most of them have diabetes, because the same growth hormone that gave them this superior stature, right, almost a superhuman height and strength, it also predisposes them to high sugar levels because of the glycogenolytic effect of growth hormone, okay? All right, so it's too much of a good thing. Too much of a good thing is a bad thing. Okay, so growth hormone also causes gluconeogenesis, and what that term means is converting non-sugary foods into sugar. Okay, so for example, proteins and fats, even those types of biomolecules are converted back into sugar. Again, your blood sugar levels go up. This typically happens in your kidneys, gluconeogenesis. Growth hormone also promotes glycogenesis. What does that mean? Genesis, to make, synthesis of glycogen. So, so glycogenesis inhibited, right? So glycogenolysis is stimulated, so your blood sugar levels are going high, and glycogenesis is inhibited. So same thing, your sugar levels are going high, not being stored as glycogen. Also lipolysis, which means breakdown of fats. So this is good for a bodybuilder, right? You're breaking down fat. Fat is going away, and lipogenesis, building fat, is inhibited. This is what growth hormone does. It makes your sugar levels go higher. It causes your fat levels to decrease. It breaks down fat, but it increases sugar. Okay, so remember what growth hormone has to do with all of these factors, glycogen and fat. And you can see what's happening with growth hormone with each of these different tissues, in liver and your fat cells, muscles, and bone. Okay, so let's take a look at your growth hormone levels with age. When do you have the highest levels of growth hormone? In between 0 to 10, your prepubertal years, right? And then it decreases steadily till by the time that you're 75 years old, it's almost next to none growth hormone. That's why Sylvester Stallone had to illegally smuggle in growth hormone when he was filming Rocky or Rambo 5 or something in Australia. And he was actually caught doing that, and he had to pay $60,000 to get out of trouble. Okay, so Sylvester Stallone and growth hormone. Let's make a quick note here as well. So yes, advancing age, and your growth hormone levels go down, and therefore it becomes that much harder to regain muscle or to maintain your muscle mass, right? All right, so look at the time of the day. When are your levels spiking? Your growth hormone levels spiking in the early stages of your sleep, right? There it is, during your sleep stages. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at an excess of growth hormone versus a deficiency. Growth hormone deficiency, you don't grow tall, you stay a midget, short height. Actually, it's called the Tom Thumb syndrome, right? Named after a real character who was quite short in stature, the Tom Thumb syndrome. So this is a lack of growth hormone. Okay, what can cause this lack of growth hormone? Many different things. maybe some tumor in the brain or some radiation that was given to the brain. Some viral infections can also damage your pituitary gland. So there's a number of different reasons for why. So you tend to have like a short stature, short height, a dwarf, also called dwarfism, and you have low blood sugar. Because remember, growth hormone causes high blood sugar, so lack of growth hormone, low blood sugar. So you have higher chances of passing out because of hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar, okay? All right, pituitary gigantism is the exact opposite. When you are extraordinarily tall because of too much growth hormone, okay? And so then you stand the risk of suffering from diabetes type 2, increased blood sugar, too much blood sugar because of too much growth hormone. And unfortunately, a lot of these large, very tall people, they also suffer complications and death at early stages. If you look at all of these famous bodybuilders, wrestlers, most of them died rather young because being big places too much strain on your heart or your kidneys. Those are the two organs that are most affected, the heart and the kidneys, right? So they tend to suffer from congestive heart failure because the heart has to pump against so much mass. It has to supply, a lot of mass there. And the kidneys fail because they have to filter out, again, that much more stuff from the body. So congestive heart failure and kidney failure are the two, chronic renal failure are the two chief causes of death in people with too much growth hormone, okay? So let me write it down here, giants and congestive heart failure and chronic renal failure. All right. So as I say, a little bit of everything and too much of nothing. Okay. That is my mantra to success in all areas of life, including your health. A little bit of everything and too much of nothing. Okay. All right. Acromegaly, what does that word even mean? Acro means your extremities, like fingers and toes, hands and feet. Mega means large. So acromegaly literally means large hands and feet. This is a result of excessive pituitary gland secretion or growth hormone secretion after puberty. Because what happens after puberty is you're not going to get any taller, your bones have already fused, right? However, your soft tissue is still growing. So these people tend to get extraordinarily big hands and feet, and the tongue becomes very thick. They might have like a thick neck, but not necessarily very tall, all right? So that's called acromegaly. They again stand the risk of developing diabetes because same growth hormone causes high sugar levels in the system as well, all right? And internal organs are larger in size as well. If you remember Andre the Giant, right, the famous wrestler from the 80s, he actually had both. He had pituitary gigantism and acromegaly. So not only was he extraordinarily tall, 7 feet, 2 inches or something, but he had gigantic hands and feet as well. So he had his growth hormone was off the charts from his pre-pubertal years to all the way into his adulthood. And he died very young as well, I think late 30s or early 40s. What is the anatomic connection between the hypothalamus and the posterior pituitary? It's called the infundibulum, right? How does the hypothalamus control the release of ADH from the posterior pituitary? By means of secreting pre-made ADH through nerves down to the posterior pituitary. What are the 6 primary hormones released from the anterior pituitary? Who remembers? Growth hormone, ACTH, TSH, FSH, LH, and prolactin, 6. How's the release of each of these hormones regulated by the hypothalamus? Hypothalamus secretes releasing hormones or inhibiting hormones to regulate these pituitary hormones. How do GHRH, IGFs function together to regulate growth? GHRH, growth hormone releasing hormone, first up comes from the hypothalamus, which causes GH or growth hormone to be secreted from your anterior pituitary, which goes down to your liver, and then your liver secretes IGF, which stands for insulin-like growth factors, and all of those work together to make you grow, simply, right? Too much of growth and you become a giant, gigantism, or acromegaly. What are the primary target organs or tissues of growth hormone and IGFs? Your bones, muscles, cartilage, tendon, connective tissue, okay? Okay, so next up, we have come down to the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland is found in the neck again, okay? So you can see in the neck region, just in front of the trachea. Here's the windpipe, the trachea, and here you're looking at the thyroid gland. You can see that the thyroid is also very vascular, a lot of blood supply to this organ here, okay? And I remember doing surgeries and assisting surgeries during my medical internship years, during my surgical rotations. And I remember that one of the things that the surgeons had to be really careful about was uh, not nicking the wrong artery or anything, because the thyroid is so vascular. You make a wrong cut and it's going to bleed forever, right? Very vascular structure. And why vascular? Again, it's an endocrine gland. Endocrine glands send out their secretions by means of blood vessels. So no surprise that around each endocrine gland, you have this rich supply of blood vessels. So you have to be that much more careful whenever performing surgery on these glands, okay? So the thyroid gland has two lobes, right lobe and left lobe. You can see it in the picture. The two lobes are joined together by an area called the isthmus. Isthmus literally means a bridge. So this is the bridge that connects the two lobes. This is a superior, these are the two superior lobes of the thyroid, and those two are the inferior lobes of the thyroid gland. Then you have the blood vessels here, the superior thyroid artery, and then the superior thyroid vein, okay? In front of the thyroid gland is the thyroid cartilage. This is your Adam's apple. So anatomically, what your Adam's apple is, it's this. It's the thyroid cartilage. Now you know what your Adam's apple is in anatomical terms, the thyroid cartilage right here, okay? All right, what else? So now here you're looking at your thyroid gland under the microscope. So this will help with your lab portion, okay? So if you look uh, at a microscope slide of the thyroid gland, you'll see this picture. And it's very easy to identify. No other gland kind of looks like with these large, big globules here, right? So these globules here, they are filled up with a protein called thyroglobulin, okay? And they have what are called follicular cells. As you can see here, these are follicular cells that surround the thyroglobulin protein here. The follicular cells secrete T3 and T4, the two thyroid hormones. T3 for triiodothyronine and T4 for thyroxine. Those are the two hormones which are secreted by the follicular cells, okay? Now, so what is inside of this, this follicle here, the thyroglobulin protein? Uh, this protein, which is called colloid. Colloid is like a protein, right? And this is called thyroglobulin. So the thyroid hormones that are secreted from here, they're basically processed in the thyroglobulin. This protein is used to hold on to the thyroid hormone secreted by the follicular cells. All right. You also have on the outer periphery something called the parafollicular cells, right? These ones are called parafollicular cells. The parafollicular cells secrete another hormone called calcitonin, okay? The follicular cells were secreting T3 and T4, the thyroid hormones. The parafollicular cells secrete something called calcitonin. What do these hormones do? So we'll take a look at those. Before we do, something else to remember, you need the element in the mineral called iodine for proper thyroid hormone secretion, okay? So for thyroglobulin synthesis, you need iodine. Without iodine, you will not be able to make the normal and the right amounts of T3 and T4. And that is the reason why they add iodine to our salt, right? If you've ever seen your salt packet, it says iodized salt, iodine added. Because back in the days, and especially if you lived in higher places, like in mountains and mountainous areas, their water and diet tends to be low in iodine. And what a lot of these people developed was a gigantic thyroid, a big thyroid that inflated the whole neck. And this was a situation, is a situation still in many parts of the world called goiter. Goiter, okay? So goiter is this enlarged thyroid gland because of a lack of iodine. So what happens when you don't have enough iodine? Upregulation, remember? Your thyroid is trying to get as much iodine as it can. So it enlarges itself. In an attempt to trap as much iodine as it can, it enlarges. And sometimes it gets so big that you can't even swallow properly or breathe properly, okay? So an inability to breathe properly because of enlarged goiter is something called dyspnea, dyspnea, I'm going to write it down here, which means difficulty breathing, and dysphagia. Dysphagia means difficulty swallowing. Okay. Yes, so your thyroid can grow to proportions where you can actually suffer from these. So how do you treat it then? You have to perform surgery and remove part of the thyroid. But you have to make sure that you don't release, don't excise or cut out too much thyroid gland, because then you will be hypothyroid. You won't be making as much hormones, right? Okay, so here you can see the T3 and T4 production going on in your thyroid glands. There they are, T3 for triiodothyronine and T4 for thyroxine or tetraiodothyronine, okay? And they're carried in your bloodstream by means of carrier molecules, proteins that carry them, okay? So here, this is how your thyroid secretion happens. First, your hypothalamus releases a hormone called TRH, for thyroid releasing hormone, which goes down to your anterior pituitary and causes the secretion of a hormone called TSH, for thyroid stimulating hormone, okay? And what type of stimulation is this? Hormonal stimulation again. And then TSH goes down to your thyroid gland in your neck and causes your thyroid gland to secrete T3 and T4, right? So three-ring circus. First level, from hypothalamus to pituitary, then from pituitary to thyroid, and from thyroid to the rest of the body, right? Okay, so then what do these thyroid hormones do, T3 and T4? They cause your nervous system to become more active, right? To become more active, your thought processes become faster. Your liver, it becomes faster too. It starts releasing sugar into your system. Your fat tissues shrink because your metabolism increases, your fat tissue shrinks. That is something called lipolysis. What happens to your lungs? You breathe faster because, again, you have a higher metabolism. What happens to your heart? Your heart speeds up. Something called tachycardia. Tachycardia, right? Heart speeding up. So all of those effects happen when you have thyroid hormones secreted and your metabolism increases. Tachycardia, heart speeding up. Okay. All right. So these are the effects of your thyroid hormones, right? They increase your metabolism, as you can see. When your metabolism increases, you become hot. You feel hot too because it has a calorigenic effect. High metabolism, just like after exercising, it generates heat. It also stimulates your protein and sugar uptake, okay? And your breathing also picks up. All right, so these are all of the effects of your thyroid hormones. Let's see what it does to the liver. The liver causes an increase in glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis and a decrease in glycogenesis, meaning your blood sugar goes up, okay? What happens to your fat tissue? They break down, okay? So you become skinnier, you break down fat. Your respiratory rate goes up, right? Your breathing rate goes higher. And your heart rate and force of contraction, your heart also beats faster. All of that happens. So now let's take a look at some problems here. What if you have too much of thyroid hormone, a condition called hyperthyroidism, versus too little thyroid hormone, something called hypothyroidism? Let's start with the first one, hyperthyroidism. What causes hyperthyroidism? It tends to run in families, number one. So it's kind of like a genetic thing. If you have autoimmune diseases where your own immune system is attacking your own tissues, these people are likely to have more hyperthyroid conditions as well, all right? So what does hyperthyroidism do in terms of signs and symptoms? Let's think about it. What will it do to the brain? It will cause you to be anxious and restless, right? Too much brain activity, hyperthyroid. What does it do to your eyes? So in a specific type of hyperthyroidism called Graves' disease, your eyes tend to bug out, right? Something called exophthalmos. Exophthalmos, eyes kind of bug out, right? So I'll just say bug eyes or bug-eyed here, right? Okay, so that might happen. What does it do to your heart rate? It increases tachycardia, fast heart. What does it do to your gastrointestinal tract, to your intestines, GI tract? Diarrhea, because they move too fast, right? What will it do to your metabolism? increased metabolism, you will feel hot. So even though it might be cold or comfortable room temperature, but you'll be peeling off your layers of clothes because you're always so hot. And that would also be as a result of hyperthyroidism, okay? What else? So anxiety, fidgetiness, inability to sit still, fast heart rate, tachycardia, heat intolerance, right? Diarrhea, all of these are what you see with hyperthyroidism, okay? How do you treat it? Either medically or surgically. Medical treatment, you might give drugs to that counter the production of thyroid hormones, all right? Some examples of those drugs would be, I'll give you two examples, something called methimazole and also carbimazole, the azole drugs for hyperthyroidism, okay? For hyperthyroidism, okay. So then what is hypothyroidism? This is low thyroid levels. What can cause it? Again, hypothyroidism because of an autoimmune disease which destroyed much of your thyroid because your own immune system is attacking your own tissues. Autoimmune diseases as a rule are more common in women. Women tend to have more autoimmune diseases as compared to men. Why? We'll get into those reasons later on, okay? So they tend to suffer more from hypothyroidism. Pregnancy also places some demands on your thyroid gland. So post-pregnancy, post-childbirth women, they also tend to have low thyroid function, okay? Hypothyroid, because they're producing thyroid hormone for at least 2 lives during pregnancy, themselves and their child, right? So that takes a toll on the thyroid gland also. Any viral infections or radiation to the neck, that can also destroy part of the thyroid tissue. In any case, when you have hypothyroidism, what are the signs and symptoms? The exact opposite of hyperthyroidism, okay? So mentally, depression, sluggishness, slowing down, depression. A lot of times when people get treated for depression, especially post parturition, postpartum females who have just given birth, it's not depression at all. It's not psychogenic depression. The hormone levels are low. Their thyroid levels are low. So as soon as you supplement the thyroid levels, their spirits are up and they just snap out of the depression too. Something to keep in mind, right? What happens to the heart? Bradycardia. Bradycardia, which is heart slows down, right? Bradycardia, slow heart rate. Slow heart rate. Clinically, what is tachycardia? Fast heart rate, a resting heart rate of greater than 100 beats per minute. That's tachycardia. What is bradycardia at rest? Heart rate of less than 60 beats per minute. That would be bradycardia, okay? What else? So you had heat intolerance, now you have cold. You're always cold intolerance here, okay? Again, because your metabolism is slow, you feel cold all the time. You're putting on layers and layers of clothes. Hypothyroidism. What happens to your GI tract? Instead of diarrhea, you have constipation now. Your skin also becomes coarse and your nails become brittle, your hair start falling out. All of these are types of signs and symptoms that you see with hypothyroidism. And weight gain. In hyperthyroidism, you had weight loss. You had a ravenous appetite, you were eating a lot, but you were losing weight because of fast metabolism. Hypothyroidism is the exact opposite. You barely sniff your food and you put on weight, okay? So how do you treat hypothyroidism? You have to replace the thyroid hormones. Synthroid is a drug which is prescribed regularly there, right? It's levothyroxine, okay? Or Synthroid for hypothyroidism. Okay, that's how you treat it. Goiter, we already talked about that. Enlarged gland in the neck, right? Calcitonin, remember this hormone was secreted by the parafollicular cells. And what calcitonin does is it causes your blood calcium levels to go down. It decreases your blood calcium levels by making more and more calcium being excreted in your urine, by causing the calcium to be deposited back in your bones, and by decreasing the reabsorption of calcium from your gut. Those are the 3 ways that calcitonin makes your blood calcium levels go down. So describe the anatomic relationship of follicular and parafollicular cells. Follicular cells are found just around the thyroid globules. Parafollicular cells are spread out even further away. Identify the specific hormone released by each. The follicular cells release T3 and T4. Parafollicular cells release calcitonin. What is the relationship of TRH, TSH, and TH in regulating metabolism? Where does TRH or thyroid releasing hormone come from? Hypothalamus releasing hormone. Where does it go? To your anterior pituitary. What does your anterior pituitary secrete? TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. Where does that one go? Down to your thyroid gland and secretes thyroid hormones, which are T3 and T4. And they bump up your metabolism. What are the primary target organs or tissues of thyroid hormone throughout the body, all over? We talked about each system. Does calcitonin decrease or increase blood calcium? Decrease it. So which hormone increases blood calcium? The parathyroid hormone, which is secreted from the parathyroid glands, which are located on the tips of your thyroid gland, 2 on the superior poles and 2 on the inferior poles of your thyroid gland. That's where you have the parathyroid glands. Okay, so now we are down to the adrenal glands, as you can see here, okay? The adrenal glands are called that because they're found on top of the kidneys. You can see it in the picture. All right, so you're looking at the right kidney here. And in case you're wondering what that little fork is doing there, someone's trying to take a bite out of the kidney or something. Well, that's something called a surgical retractor, right? It's a tool, a surgical tool, which is used to like pull or push the tissue out of the field of vision so you can visualize the organs, okay? So that's a surgical retractor, not an artifact. And then here's the kidney. Here's the ureter, okay? That's the renal artery and the renal vein, okay? You can see those structures. And then here's the adrenal gland. This is a real cadaver, right? Someone who was having an autopsy or maybe some kind of a surgery. And so you can visualize the adrenal gland clearly in this picture here. Okay. So now this is the adrenal gland under the microscope. And as you can see, the adrenal gland has 3 layers to it, okay? Let's talk about it. Well, first, let's take a look at a gross picture. Gross means a large, macro, big picture of the adrenal gland. This is what the adrenal gland looks like. A lot of fat. All this yellow stuff is adipose, fat tissue on the outside, the capsule, okay? Then what? Then this pinkish region, this is called the adrenal cortex, the outer region, adrenal cortex, this one, right? And this inner region, which is like bluish in color with a lot of blood vessels, veins, and arteries depicted here, this is called the adrenal medulla. So this is the deeper region, adrenal medulla, surrounded by the adrenal cortex. So actually it's your adrenal cortex that release the adrenocortical steroid hormones. They all come from the adrenal cortex. The adrenal medulla, which is the deeper region here, this releases the biogenic amines called adrenaline and noradrenaline, also called epinephrine and norepinephrine. They all come from here, okay? All right, so what does the adrenal gland look like under the microscope? Let's take a look here. So first up, there's the capsule at the very top, right? Then you have the first zone called the zona glomerulosa, this one here, okay? Then you have the thickest of all zones called the zona fasciculata, right here. And then you have the zona reticularis. And when you go deeper, then this is your adrenal medulla. The whole thing was the cortex here, and this region here is the adrenal medulla, okay? So this is the classic distinction of what each of those layers look like. So what is secreted by each layer? The outermost zona glomerulosa here, this will secrete what are called mineralocorticoids, such as aldosterone. Aldosterone is a hormone which is classified as a mineralocorticoid. Why? Because aldosterone acts on a mineral to conserve it in your body. What mineral is that? Sodium. In other words, salt. Aldosterone reabsorbs salt back in your body, okay? And why would you like to conserve salt? Because salt holds water, it maintains your blood pressure, okay? And that's why if you eat too much salt, which the typical American diet has about 20 to 100 times more of what you should eat on a daily basis, you get high blood pressure or hypertension. And high blood pressure has been called a silent killer because it causes so many problems related to all body systems, right? So silent killer, hypertension, high blood pressure, and a high salt diet is one of the main reasons why you might have it. It is also genetic, but your diet has to do with that too. So aldosterone comes from there, okay? Then what comes from zona fasciculata here? Your stress hormone called cortisol. Cortisol comes from zona fasciculata, also called glucocorticoids, because cortisol acts on your glucose levels. Cortisol makes you diabetic. Too much of stress hormone, as I mentioned, and your glucose levels go high up. So cortisol is your glucocorticoid. Finally, if you go down here to the zona reticularis, this layer secretes male sex hormones called androgens or adrenal androgens. Okay, so they come from here. And then again, adrenal medulla, the deepest of all, adrenaline is secreted from there. These were steroids, the aldosterone, the cortisol, the adrenal androgens, they were all steroids. The adrenaline that comes from here is a different class of hormone called biogenic amine, okay? So there, we are looking at what each layer secretes and what each of those do, okay? So aldosterone holds back salt in your system. So the American president, John F. Kennedy, he was publicly known for having suffered from Addison's disease. Addison's disease is when an autoimmune process, in other words, your body's own immune response destroys your mineralocorticoid, your zona glomerulosa. So he wasn't making as much aldosterone. So, which meant what? He had low blood pressure, the other extreme. He had low blood pressure, he would pass out. He also had these pigmented areas on his skin and all of those things. So he was publicly known for having a deficiency of mineralocorticoids like aldosterone. Glucocorticoids, on the other hand, the stress hormone. So there is a disease entity called Cushing's disease. So what happens in Cushing's disease is when you have too much cortisol, too much of stress hormone being secreted, something also called hypercortisolism. Hypercortisolism, okay? So too much cortisol, what would that do? It will give you what is called a moon face, okay? So you, because of water retention, you get kind of like a double chin, right? Like a rounded moon face. It also gives you kind of like a buffalo hump at the back of the neck. There's a lot of fat deposition, so a buffalo hump. And this is something that you will see with pregnancy and with people who are chronically stressed. They tend to put on weight. And this weight is like this double chin kind of picture, right? It goes with stress, the moon face, and then the buffalo hump and the back of the neck. And also truncal obesity. They also get Cushing's disease, truncal obesity, like they have a protruding abdomen, a lot of fat in the abdomen, but the limbs are wasted, very thin arms and legs, but a big belly. So this is what a typical Cushing syndrome looks like, all right? It increases your blood sugar, makes you diabetic as well. And then finally, you have the zona reticularis that secretes male sex hormones, both males and females. And actually, it's this zone right here in your adrenal glands that maintains the sex drive or libido in a female, right? So a lot of time, females who complain of a low sex drive, something called hypoactive sex desire disorder, which is an actual disease entity in your current psychiatric manual, has to do with a lack of adrenal androgens in many cases from the adrenal glands. So you give them testosterone and their sex drive is all back to normal, their bones are healthy and all of that, all right? So this area is responsible for maintaining libido in females specifically. All right. Okay, so then moving on. So what affects and controls the levels of cortisol or the stress hormone in your system, okay? Time of day. So your stress levels are the highest when you wake up, first wake up, and it comes as no surprise to most people, right? Especially on a Monday morning. Studies have shown that most heart attacks happen on a Monday, okay? On Mondays, most heart attacks on Mondays around 8 a.m. On Mondays around 8 a.m. Based on ER data. And that comes as no surprise. People are waking up, they're starting out a whole new week ahead of them, work, boss, commute, all of those things on their mind. They might have been partying all over the weekend, so they already have some hangover going on, and they're dehydrated and all of that. So this is what happens, right? Okay, so effects of cortisol, what does it do? It increases your blood sugar levels, makes you diabetic. It decreases your fat levels, okay? Breaks down fat. It also breaks down your protein, so you also lose muscle here, okay? And it dampens your immune response, so you get more infections with high stress because of cortisol. So when you take cortisol cream, like corticosterone, which is a steroid cream, and you use these creams to prevent inflammation. If you have like a mosquito bite or some other rash going on, you want to suppress the inflammation, then you take these steroid creams. And what they do is they suppress your immune system. And so you don't have these symptoms as much. But remember, because you're suppressing the immune system, you have an even higher risk of infection in the future, higher risk of cancer as well, all right? And your tissue repair is also slowed down. Your wounds don't heal as fast when you're putting steroid creams on there. So we talked about these two disease entities, right? Cushing syndrome and Addison's disease. So make sure that you go over this and you know what that is. This is what happens when you have too much of secretion of male sex hormone, the adrenal androgens from the zona reticularis. It can happen in an embryo or a fetus, so you have a child born and you cannot determine the biological sex because let's say if it's a female with congenital adrenogenital syndrome, then her clitoris is large enough to where it might be misdiagnosed as a micropenis, right? It can happen. Clitoromegaly, something called that is called that. So that can happen there as well. So stress response, too much cortisol when you're under stress. Three stages to it: the alarm stage, the stage of resistance, and the stage of exhaustion. When you're stressed, first your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight, adrenaline kicks in, right? So you start losing fat and your heart beats faster and you get this surge of energy and glucose. But if this goes on for too long, for days on end, then stage of resistance, then you start running out of your glucose stores, right? Then your blood sugar levels start to plummet. And then finally, stage of exhaustion, when you have depleted your energy sources, your fat stores, now you're seriously ill. And this is what happens with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. These people, like war veterans or people who have suffered from rape or sexual abuse or natural disasters or some extremely traumatic event, a childhood event or something, that causes PTSD. So it starts out with the alarm reaction, right? They have high levels of adrenaline and they're always jumpy on edge, looking over the shoulder, the heart thumping fast. And then slowly they deplete their energy, the blood pressure stays high, which puts them at risk for infections, for heart attacks, strokes, all kinds of things, and stage of exhaustion. If nobody treats that, eventually they will fall seriously ill. Their immune system would be depleted, their energy stores would be depleted. So that's why they need treatment and therapy. Which hormone is produced by the middle zona fasciculata of the adrenal cortex? Cortisol. What is the relationship of CRH, ACTH, and cortisol? CRH from the hypothalamus, ACTH from the anterior pituitary, cortisol from the zona fasciculata of your adrenal cortex. What are the primary target organs of your cortisol? All across: muscles, fat tissue, right? Heart, brain, everywhere. Okay, so the next up, we are talking about the pancreas. And the pancreas is this pistol-shaped organ in your left hypogastrium, pistol-shaped, right? Roughly, that's what it looks like. So this is the tail of the pancreas. Here's the body, and here's the head. And the head is nicely nestled in between the loops of your small intestine, as you can see. And there's the spleen close to it, all right? Okay, and then running right across the body of the pancreas is the pancreatic duct. So your pancreas is called the dual organ because it has both an exocrine and an endocrine function, okay? So what is the endocrine function of pancreas? It secretes hormones like glucagon and insulin into the bloodstream. That's the endocrine function. What is the exocrine function? The pancreas also makes something called pancreatic juice, which helps with the digestion of food, and the pancreatic juice is carried or conveyed by means of this pancreatic duct and emptied into your small intestine. This is exocrine because, see, it's going through a duct and it's going to a specific point, right? So you can see all of that here in this picture. All right, this is your pancreas under the microscope. Again, easy to identify, I hope. because you're looking at many dark areas, darker purple colored areas called the SNR cells or the pancreatic sinus, as you can see here. And these patches of lighter colored areas called the islets of Langerhans or the pancreatic islets, as you can see, islands, right? How you have these little islands in a sea of dark purple. So your pancreatic islands, also called islets of Langerhans, those areas are made up of two types of cells, alpha cells and beta cells. The beta cells secrete insulin from here. The alpha cells secrete glucagon. And these two are antagonistic hormones. They work oppositely, right? The insulin decreases your blood sugar levels. The glucagon increases your blood sugar levels. Something to remember. All right. And what about this, all of the surrounding pancreatic SNR cells? They are the exocrine part of the pancreas. In other words, these cells secrete the pancreatic juice, which is rich in bicarbonate. It is alkaline. It comes from these surrounding cells. The islets, the middle cells, they secrete. These are the endocrine parts. They secrete insulin and glucagon, okay? So your normal blood sugar levels are in between 60 to 110 milligrams of glucose per deciliter, okay? If you have high levels of sugar, it causes damage to your tissues, especially the eyes, the kidneys, your blood vessels, nerves, and your heart. That's what happens in diabetes. Too much sugar, bacteria love sugar. They attack your system, you get infections, especially in your feet. You get these nasty ulcers on your foot and you don't feel anything because your nerves are dead also, right? So high sugar levels damage your blood vessels and your nerves. That's why impotence, erectile dysfunction, inability to get an erection or sensation in males is common in people with diabetes for the same reason. This is damage to the blood supply and to the nerves supplying the genital area there, okay? So what these people need is insulin. Insulin reduces their blood sugar levels by pushing the extra sugar inside of their cells, okay? What else does insulin do? Insulin does all of this. In the liver, insulin stimulates glycogenesis. In other words, taking sugar from all over the system and depositing it in your liver and muscle as glycogen. Glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis are inhibited. So making of sugar, turning glycogen into sugar, or making sugar from non-sugary foods, that's inhibited. It's trying to bring the sugar down. What happens in your fat cells or adipose cells? Lipogenesis is stimulated, so you deposit fat when you have this. And this reminds me of a tragic string of teenage female high school deaths that were in the news a few years back. So this happened across many states. And this was like the competitive season. A lot of inter-school competitive athletic events were taking place. And that's when a string of these young female athletes, unfortunately, they were brought to the ER in a coma and they died. And they were in the news. So what was eventually figured out was that these athletes, these females, high school female athletes, were diabetic. They were on insulin therapy, right? But just before the athletic event, they stopped taking their insulin. Why? They were trying to avoid this fat deposition. They didn't want to gain any weight before these events. Unfortunately, when you don't take insulin and your blood sugar levels stay high, you can go into a diabetic coma, diabetic or ketoacidotic coma, right? Simply called DKA for diabetic ketoacidosis. Diabetic ketoacidosis. That happened. So why does it happen? Why do you go in a coma if you don't take insulin for when you have high sugar levels in diabetes? So what does insulin do? It pushes sugar into your cells, right? But if you're not taking your insulin, then what's happening to the sugar? It's not going into your cells. It's all over your body. You're thick with sugar, but it's just not getting inside of your cells where it's needed. So your cells, it's a paradox. In spite of an overabundance of sweet sugar and sweet blood that you have all over, your cells are still being starved of that sugar. So what do? They cannot use sugar as a food source. So alternatively, they start using fat for food. And here's the thing, when you start breaking down fat for food in a process called beta oxidation, you start, fat generates these acidic substances called ketone bodies, ketones. These are acidic substances. So the ketone levels start to go high, and then you become so acidic that your brain starts to shut down. You go into a coma. Okay, so then how would you control this? You give insulin to the patient. You also rehydrate the patient. Put in an IV line, start pumping 0.9% normal saline or some kind of a fluid in their system so that they can uh, regain their hydration, right? So, in fact, the diagnosis of diabetes is based on the three P's, okay? The three P's: polyphagia, polydipsia, and polyuria. These are often the first three signs and symptoms, rather, of diabetes. If you're always hungry, polyphagia, your appetite increases all of a sudden, even though you're losing weight, but you're eating more. Polydipsia, you're feeling thirsty more than usual, and polyuria, you're urinating, getting up multiple times in the night to go urinate, which is unusual, all right? Often the very first three P's, three signs of impending diabetes. Why does it happen? Let's think about it. Why polyphagia? What did I just say? Since you don't have enough insulin, even though you have a lot of sugar, your cells are paradoxically still being starved. So you're still hungry. You can eat all the foods you want. That sugar is not getting inside of the cells. You don't have enough insulin, right? Polydipsia. Why is that? The more the amount of sugar, the more thirsty you feel. We all know that, right? If you eat a lot of salt or sugar, you feel thirsty. So you drink a lot of water, and since you drink a lot of water and there's so much sugar there, you also go and urinate that much more. So polyuria. So now it makes sense why you have these three P's when you have diabetes developing, right? Okay, what does it do to your protein synthesis? It makes muscle. Insulin will make muscle. So that's the good news. If you're a bodybuilder, insulin will make muscle, but it will also make fat at the same time on the other side, okay? All right, okay. So here you can look at the insulin and all of its effects. So diabetes, okay, what is that? The number one cause of blindness and kidney failure and major cause of morbidity and mortality across the United States, much of the world, diabetes, okay? Too much sugar. It goes back to too much sugar in our diets. So you watch your sugar content. I personally have completely relinquished putting any sugar in my coffee because I used to drink coffee quite liberally. I don't drink as much, but I've completely eliminated sugar. And my weight went down substantially. And I feel much, much better ever since. Okay. So now diabetes is of two types, as you can see here, type 1 and type 2. What's the difference? In type 1 diabetes, you are not making any insulin at all. So what might happen is, and this is also called, type 1 diabetes is also called juvenile onset diabetes. Juvenile onset diabetes, also called uh, uh, insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, or IDDM, insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. Let's talk about why it's called that. Why juvenile onset? You see this type of diabetes, type 1, in individuals usually younger than 40 years of age. Children who have suffered from viral infections like mumps and so on, that has destroyed their pancreatic tissue, or radiation, or some trauma to the pancreas, or sometimes just an autoimmune reaction that has destroyed the pancreas, they're not making any insulin. So children develop this, younger individuals. Why is it called insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus? Because the problem is a lack of insulin, right? The pancreas is not making that hormone. So that's why the treatment here is give them insulin here, as you can see, okay? So then what's type 2 diabetes then? So now this is by far more common. 90% of diabetic cases are type 2, okay? So type 2 diabetes is also called maturity onset diabetes, and it's also called non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, okay? Non-insulin dependent. Now let's take a look at why. So why maturity onset? It's usually seen in people past 40 years of age. It's also seen in obese and overweight people more. The problem here is not necessarily a lack of insulin. They have all the insulin that they need. They have too much fat around their organs to where the insulin cannot physically access the organs and push the sugar into their cells. That's the problem, too much fat. So therefore, maturity onset diabetes. And so why is it called NIDDM? Non-insulin dependent. The problem is not insulin here again. The problem is too much fat. So now you can tell me what the treatment is. Weight control, fat loss, right? So losing weight any up to 5 to 10 pounds of fat weight sometimes can cure you completely of this type. It will go into remission. If you reduce your weight even more, it can go away. So type 2 diabetes is very much a lifestyle disease. It's treatable if you measure the calories that you're taking in or you're physically active. You can control this, all right? Not necessarily with type 1 diabetes, but type 2 diabetes, which is far more common, is obesity and diet related. All the sodas and these sugary beverages that you drink, to cut down on all of that, all right? More fruits and vegetables, what is called a Mediterranean diet. That's what is recommended here, right? Mediterranean diet, which is what? Mediterranean diet is fruits and nuts and lentils and legumes and fish and no red meat or very minimal red meat, red wine, plenty of water, olive oil, right? All of these are components of that. And studies have shown that the Mediterranean diet is the healthiest of all for people in general, especially heart patients and diabetics. Okay, so diet, exercise, extremely important here. Then you have gestational diabetes. This happens in women during pregnancy, but here's the thing. Women with gestational diabetes, almost all of them will go on to develop full-blown type 2 diabetes, even outside of pregnancy down the line. So this is about the time where you should be making these lifestyle changes if you have gestational diabetes. Okay, hypoglycemia is the exact opposite, where you have your blood glucose levels less than 60 milligrams per deciliter. Again, it's common in people who are very, very wasted, people who are starving on a diet, pregnant women, again, because they need so many more calories, so their blood sugar levels can dip. Or if someone has Addison's disease, right? These kinds of things can cause your blood sugar levels. Or if you have pituitary dwarfism, not too much growth hormone, again, you can have hypoglycemia, okay? Genetics, it tends to run in certain families. If you are a chronic alcoholic, liver disease, kidney failure, all of those can cause your blood glucose levels to dip. And so what's the treatment? Well, give them sugar or give them the hormone glucagon. Glucagon is the exact opposite of insulin. So everything that insulin does, glucagon does the exact opposite. In other words, glucagon, as you can see here, stimulates glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis. It increases blood sugar levels and it inhibits glycogenesis, again, increasing blood sugar. What does it do to your fatty acids? It breaks down fat rather than what insulin did. Insulin was building fat, right? Okay, so those are the actions of glucagon versus insulin. So why is the pancreas considered both an exocrine gland and an endocrine gland? Well, the pancreas secretes insulin and glucagon, which are hormones, so that's an endocrine function. The pancreas also secretes pancreatic juice, which is an exocrine function, so both. Is the stimulus for insulin and glucagon released from the pancreas hormonal, humoral, or nervous? What causes insulin and glucagon to be released? Your blood sugar levels. So that's humoral. That's a humoral response. What are the stimulus, receptor, control center, and effector response to the release of insulin? The stimulus is too much sugar. The receptor is your brain, the hypothalamus. The control center, again, the hypothalamus, right? And the effector response is you release insulin, which causes that extra sugar to go inside of your cells. Which of these hormones causes release of glucose into the blood? Growth hormone, yes, it does. It increases your blood glucose levels. Thyroid hormones, yes, they increase blood glucose. Cortisol, stress hormone from the adrenal cortex, from the zona fasciculata, increases blood sugar. Insulin decreases blood sugar. Glucagon increases blood sugar again. Okay, pineal gland. Okay, so why is it called that? Apparently it resembles the pine cone somewhat, so pineal gland. It's a small gland found right behind your hypothalamus, okay? And it secretes a hormone called melatonin. Melatonin puts you to sleep. It regulates your sleep wakefulness cycle, something called the circadian rhythm. and also affects your mood. Okay. So melatonin also influences your gonadotropin releasing hormone secretions. It also has to do with reproductive function like ovulation and sperm production. Okay. So classically, what that means is during the winter months or when the nights are long and the daylight hours are short, your reproductive functions get depressed. You don't make as much sperm and don't ovulate as much. As spring approaches, more sunlight, more um, daylight hours, then your reproductive activities pick up as well. Something called spring fever, so-called spring fever, right? So if you follow wildlife, you see their rutting season and their courtship rituals also pick up during the springtime. Same thing happens in humans as well, right? Spring fever and melatonin. So you also have something called SAD, S-A-D, for seasonal affective disorder. This is more common in places where the winters are prolonged and where there's not much sun, right? So people tend to get depressed when there's not much, there's like cloud cover, it's like damp, not much sunlight. I used to have that too. Fortunately, with my daily exercise and walking schedule, I try to get as much sunlight throughout the week as much as possible. It has gone down. But if you tend to be indoors most of the time, seasonal affective disorder, you feel depressed, you feel the blues and that has to do with your melatonin levels as well. Okay. Right. So the parathyroid hormones, we talked about those. They're located on the two tips of your of your thyroid gland. They secrete a hormone called parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone increases your blood calcium levels. Okay. And parathyroid hormone comes from cells called the chief cells found inside of your parathyroid glands. Okay. So how does the parathyroid hormone increase your blood calcium levels? It increases the reabsorption of calcium from your gut. It increases the reabsorption of calcium from your kidneys, and it increases the reabsorption of calcium from your bones. 3 ways. All right. Let me take care of this. All right, so then thymus. Okay, so what is thymus? It's an endocrine gland located in your chest in a region called the mediastinum, right in the middle of the chest. It's functional and larger in children. At the time of puberty, it shrinks, it shrivels up, and does not function as well, right? What does the thymus do? It releases thymic hormones like thymopoietin, and these thymic hormones are necessary for your immune system development, specifically for the maturation of immune cells called T lymphocytes. We talk about those later on. So that happens at the thymus level. And that explains why children get more infections, right? Their thymus is still developing and getting used to all these germs and pathogens. By the time you're an adult, your immune system has developed already by that time. So then you also have your heart as a secondary endocrine gland because it secretes something called ANP, atrial natriuretic peptide. What does that do? Look at the term itself, atrial natriuretic peptide. Atrial means it is secreted from the right atrium, the right upper chamber of the heart. Natriuretic, it secretes or excretes salt or sodium in the urine. That's what it do. And peptide, it's a protein hormone. So atrial natriuretic peptide. In other words, whenever there's too much blood returning to your heart, too much water retention in your body, ANP is secreted and it causes you to excrete, to urinate out the extra water. And this is especially helpful in patients of congestive heart failure. Okay, patients who are swollen up, the heart is not pumping as much blood, the feet are swollen and all them. So they need this hormone to urinate out the extra fluid. Kidneys, they secrete a hormone called erythropoietin or EPO for epogen. Epogen is the generic name of that hormone. What erythropoietin does is it increases your red blood cell production from your bone marrow, okay, your red blood cell production. So cancer patients, as an example, have a problem with anemia. Or if you're losing a lot of iron, you have this problem as well. So these patients are given erythropoietin to bump up their red blood cell production, okay? What else? Liver secretes some hormones like angiotensinogen. This is a protein hormone that is secreted by the liver. What angiotensinogen does is it converts an enzyme called angiotensin 1 Actually, angiotensinogen itself is converted into something called uh, angiotensin 1, okay? And this comes from the kidneys. Then angiotensin 1 is converted into angiotensin 2 by means of an enzyme called ACE, for angiotensin converting enzyme, okay? And angiotensin 2 is a very powerful blood pressure increaser, right? It's a vasoconstrictor. It causes your blood vessels to constrict and increases your blood pressure. So that comes from the liver, okay? So to maintain your blood pressure, you need angiotensin 2, and that's a hormone that comes from your liver. Okay, stomach, we talked about that one. It secretes gastrin. Gastrin causes your stomach to secrete more acid, okay, for digestion of food in the stomach, okay. Small intestine secretes those two, secretin and cholecystokinin or CCK, and both of those hormones increase digestive juice secretion to help you digest food. Skin secretes the hormone called vitamin D, okay? And vitamin D is basically in the skin, it's in the form of uh, something called vitamin D3, okay? This vitamin D3 then goes to your liver and then is converted into vitamin D2, also called calcidiol. Then this vitamin D2 or calcidiol goes to your kidneys. And then the third step happens where it matures into calcitriol. Now, calcitriol is the active vitamin D. And what does vitamin D do? It increases your blood calcium levels for healthy bones and teeth. So get your sunlight, get your 5 minutes of sun every day. Okay, your fat tissue, that's also endocrine. The more fat that you have, the more leptin you're secreting. What does leptin do? It controls appetite, okay? So if you have enough fat tissue building up, it secretes leptin, and leptin signals to the brain to stop eating. The opposite of leptin is a hormone called ghrelin, and ghrelin is secreted from your stomach lining cells, right? And what ghrelin does is it makes you hungry. So it's a balance between leptin and ghrelin that determines how fat or skinny you are, right? Leptin makes you stop eating and it's secreted from your fat cells. Ghrelin makes you hungry and it's secreted from your stomach cells. In most of the cases of obesity, remember, obesity is 70% genetic. It tends to run in families. 70% genetic, only 30% environmental, okay? So that means that some people inherit the genes for setting their hypothalamus, their thermostat, for eating at a higher level. So it's not like they're deliberately eating more. That's the threshold in the brain. It's genetically determined. 70% it's genetic. 30% depends on the food choices that you make and the type of people that you're eating with and and the types of foods that you're eating. So in a lot of these cases, the brain does not respond normally to leptin. Leptin is telling the brain to stop eating, but the brain doesn't recognize it. So now the new avenue of research for scientists is to somehow play around with those hormones and how the brain responds to leptin to prevent obesity, okay? All right, but keep this in mind as well. Just the fact that you have too much fat in your body, especially the belly fat, the beer belly, right? The visceral fat, the deep fat in the belly, that is secreting all kinds of inflammatory substances that are causing inflammation in your body. And inflammation, long-term chronic inflammation because of carrying that extra fat, causes cancer and heart disease and sleep apnea and snoring and what else? Joint problems, arthritis. COVID-19 is likely to kill obese people way more than people who are non-obese. We know that. People with high blood pressure, more so than normal blood pressure, normotensive patients. Non-diabetic patients don't suffer as much as diabetic patients, all right? So that's something you have to keep in mind. But if you have too little of fat, for a female, as an example, your menstrual cycle gets out of haywire, right? So again, it is a balance between a little bit of everything and too much of nothing, right? So be aware of all those risks. Okay, how do melatonin levels change throughout the day? They increase as nighttime approaches, and then they decrease when you open your eyes and sunlight floods into your brain. So what is the primary hormones released from the parathyroid gland? The parathyroid hormone. What is its general function? It releases blood calcium levels, increases them. What is the function of the kidney in regulating erythrocyte or red blood cell concentration within the blood? Um, Kidneys release a hormone called erythropoietin or epogen, which increases red blood cell production. What organ releases angiotensinogen? Your liver. And what is the function of angiotensinogen following its activation? Angiotensinogen gets converted into angiotensin 1, and angiotensin 1 gets converted into angiotensin 2, which increases your blood pressure. So angiotensin 2 is a potent blood pressure maintainer, okay? So what happens as you age? Well, your endocrine systems shrink, both in structure and function, right? They don't secrete as many hormones, decreased levels of normal hormones, especially your growth hormone and your sex hormones, they go down. So you lose muscle mass, you lose your bones, you might develop osteoporosis, thin, frail bones, weak muscles, right? Obviously your libido goes down, females have menopause, males have sometimes called a male menopause or andropause. So all those things happen with aging, okay? But if you exercise and stay healthy and eat a nice, proper, balanced Mediterranean diet, then you can maintain your baseline for much longer. And your genetics play a major part in how well you age as well, okay? So what general changes occur? You lose bone and muscle mass and your reproductive functions go down. Okay, so that was the end of our talk on the endocrine system. Okay, so then let me quickly get you back to the lab portion here. So I'm going to show you the LID, the lab information document. Again, much of the information is the same. My name, important information here, my email address, office hours. Okay, so what do you need for your lab is basically two things again, okay? Your lab manual, either a hard copy, actual manual, or an electronic, doesn't matter, copy. But it is Exploring Human Anatomy and Physiology by Aaron C. Emmerman, third edition. That's the one, okay? That's one. The other thing, and again, I don't care if it's a hard copy or if it's an online ebook, doesn't matter, okay? Or if you get it from someone else or secondhand, doesn't matter at all, as long as you have access to these activities. The other thing you will need is your access to Connect website, and that's needed for your lecture too, so it's not something extra. You have to have access to the Connect website, and I've sent you that link, okay? So how will these labs work? Okay, so you just saw that I sent out an attachment and some instructions on Tuesday. This is something that will happen every week. Every Tuesday, I'll send you what activities need to be turned in and an attachment which will exactly tell you step by step what to do, okay? Mostly, you will have to go back to your lab manual and work on some pre-lab exercises. Instructions are all there. Just follow them and put it to paper, all right? Or type them out, whichever works best for you. I really don't have a preference there. Sometimes you will also have to go to the Connect website and work on some virtual labs, such as for this week, you had the thyroid hormone lab, you had the glucose lab, hand washing and personal safety. Just take it, okay? Now, again, since these are extraordinary circumstances, do not aim for perfection, okay? Do your best. So follow the instructions, do the labs to your best, to the best of your ability, and turn them in, okay? Do not worry about being extra technically right in everything. Turn it in to the best of your ability. Also, once you do your pre-labs or something, let's say on a piece of paper, take a picture with your cell phone, email me your work, and that's all I need. Email me your work. For the virtual labs, you don't need to do anything because I can check the virtual labs at my end by logging into the Connect website. So you don't have to send me, you can send me the screenshots if you really want to or pictures, but I can check them on my end too. But for the other work that needs to be done using the lab manual that you have to write down on a journal or a notebook paper or something, take a selfie, and all of these are written in the attachment. So read the attachments, follow the steps, send me your selfies, the pictures of your work at my email address. And that's all you have to do by Saturday midnight. That's the deadline. So I'll send this out on Tuesday. You have the next 4 to 5 days to finish that work. Then I've extended the deadline for your first assignment anyway, Okay. So hopefully that clears up the situation somewhat. If you are still, you have still have questions, which you likely will, email me and I will get back to you and answer those. Okay. All right. So the lab manual, what else? The grades. Okay. So let's take a look at how the grades work here. So you will have 3 lab exams at 65 points each. All 3 of those lab exams would be posted on the Connect website, and I'll give you sometimes an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on how many questions, to work on the Connect website and turn in the answers. Okay, these are all again posted on the online on the Connect website. Uh, and these questions will have to do with pictures. What are you looking at? What is its function? What are you looking at? What type of tissue? What does it secrete? What is its function? I will send out a study guide. Again, for all of your lab exams, you will receive a study guide too. Okay. And you can work at your own pace on the Connect website. So I will be sending out those instructions in the study guides too. There's 3 of those lab exams. Okay. Then it says 7 quizzes at 15 points each. What are those quizzes about? These are not separate quizzes. The work that you will turn in every week, based on what I tell you on the attachment that I'm going to email out every Tuesday, I'm going to take some of those activities randomly for grades. So, and I'll take 7 of those, 15 points each. So what you're going to do for your part is make sure you turn in those labs, the attach as in keeping with the attachments that I send out every week. That's all you have to do. And I'll take them for a grade. Okay. Again, do not freak out about the technicality and being super, accurate in everything. Do your best. Okay. Keep checking your emails for the study guides that I will send out for the exams. So students, exam format is students will be shown images, models, microscope slides, and specimens studied in lab, and will answer questions about those items on the Connect website, as I just mentioned. The quiz grades will be taken from the lab activities done and submitted by the students every Saturday by midnight to the worksheet. According to the worksheet, the instructor will send out every Tuesday in advance. Late assignments will not be graded. There are some exceptions. There are no makeups for missed quizzes. All right. And then again, if a student has an excused absence and has notified the instructor within 24 hours of the absence from an exam, the average of the other lab exam scores may be used to make up for 1 lab exam grade. Again, depending on individual cases. Missing additional exams will result in scores of 0 on those exams. Okay. All right. So that was the LID. And then let me just quickly get back here to the other actual schedule here, okay? And then let me share screen. There we go. Okay, here you go. So here's your lab schedule, okay? These are the activities that are due. I've also sent out that email with the attachment of exactly how to do that. That's all you'll be working on for this week. Okay, again, all you need is the lab manual in either hard copy or soft copy, electronic form, doesn't matter, and access to the Connect website. And follow the attachment that I've sent out, okay? Uh, Exam dates are in red, bold red here. Practical exam 1 on March the 6th. And I will be sending out a study guide in advance of how to do that, okay? So practical exam 1, then exam 2 on April the 10th, and then the final exam 3 on May the 8th, the last day, okay? There is no comprehensive exam on your labs, just these 3 individual uh, lab exams, okay? So here's your schedule. Okay, so that is it pretty much. And so yeah, take your time listening to the lectures. I'll be sending out this recorded lecture. You'll get it, and you'll also get the notes that I've taken out here. So study them. Uh, Use your online resources, right? YouTube videos are excellent. Google different topics. Go through them and spend some time studying the topics. Feel free to email me if you have any questions. Uh, and Take care in the meantime. Stay safe, healthy, happy, productive. Keep me in the loop as to how things are going. And hopefully it's going to be a great semester, learning wise and growth wise in every sense of the word. All right. Okay, so y'all take care, and I'll see you all virtually next Saturday, same time. Um, Labs, something to keep in mind. All right. Bye bye.